I'll never forget the day I had to play doctor in public. Crazy symptoms that these people ignored. I saw a man sweating profusely, eyes popping out in the middle of winter with a light sweater on. I told him to go see his GP to get a thyroid blood test today and get referred to an endocrinologist for Graves' disease. He called me crazy and to mind my own business. I ended up seeing him in a clinic the next week during my endocrinology rotation. "Hi doc, sorry I called you crazy." My grandfather was the definition of a walking doctor. He wasn't afraid to ask you about your bowel movements within the first 5 minutes of getting to know you. Sitting on a plane next to him, waiting room of the DMV, lunch, he'd talk with everyone and everything if it meant he got an interesting conversation. One time he diagnosed a person he was sitting next to on a flight with von Hippel-Lindau, which is a rare disease that causes tumors to grow randomly on the body. The guy said specialists he had been to couldn't figure out what caused them, and later contacted him after tests were done for the disease to tell him he was correct in his diagnosis. Have tons of other stories similar to this. Yes, I'm a doctor, and a few months ago my wife and I were at a restaurant and an older gentleman passed out, fell down and hit his head on the counter. He was unconscious for probably 30 seconds. I went over and checked him out. He came to, was a little confused and blamed it on his blood sugar. Actually, passing out from a blood sugar issue rather than bouncing right back and being awake without eating or drinking would be pretty rare. I asked medical history kind of questions and found out he's on Coumadine, as evidenced by the multiple bruises on his arms and head. He had a nice big cherry on his head and a huge bruise over his temple, and he told me that he passes out all the time, so this wasn't a big deal. 1. With multiple passing out episodes at his age, he likely has arrhythmia, which could be dangerous and needs to be checked out. 2. He just suffered a head injury and was on blood thinners and could have had a brain bleed. And 3. He had a head laceration that probably could have used closing. I highly advised he go get checked out at the hospital, but he of course refused because, again, this happens all the time. It amazes me how the observation is, "I randomly pass out all the time," and they conclude with, "Oh, this isn't a problem." You know, I imagine that if you were correctly diagnosed with some sort of fainting condition, you could at least accept that this was a state of being. But yeah, the old guy is a little bit cavalier about the dangerous situation he's in. I am a doctor, but this story isn't about me. But it still fits, I think. So this police officer rolls up to an altercation between a guy and his dealer. Apparently the dealer sold the guy fake green herb, and the guy came back angry when he opened the package and found oregano inside, and he and the dealer got into a big fight. There were a bunch of punches thrown, and the dealer apparently shanked the guy in the chest with a small knife he had. Emphasis on small. By the time the cops got there, they were both just screaming at each other. The purchaser accused the dealer of shanking him, but insisted he was fine because it was just a pocket knife. Arrests were made, and because the purchaser got attacked with a weapon, the cops insisted he just needed to go to the hospital to get checked out. When I talked to the arresting officer afterwards, she said, "He just seemed really anxious, pacing around, kind of sweaty, and the ambulance was taking a while. I finally just decided to bring him in myself." So of course, that really small pocket knife had lacerated the guy's right atrium, and his pericardium was filling up with blood. He tamponated and arrested when he hit the floor. I honestly don't know that we would have saved him had I not been on call with a former military trauma surgeon who basically cracked his sternum open in the ER. But we did. I tracked that cop down afterwards to tell her that she 100% saved his life. If they'd waited another 10 to 15 minutes for the ambulance, the guy would have died. No questions about it. Early shock can look a lot like intoxication, FYI. It wasn't exactly outside of work, but I was not the MD's patient. I took my 8-year-old son for a consultation with a pediatric neurologist. He was really nervous and didn't want the doctor to examine him, so I let the doctor test my reflexes first to familiarize my son with the process. When the neurologist stroked the bottom of my left foot, my toes fanned out instead of curling in. This isn't supposed to happen. The neurologist didn't like some of the other results as well, and asked his colleague to take me on as a patient and admit me to the hospital for further testing. Testing indicated multiple sclerosis, but more importantly revealed white blood cells in the fluid around my spinal cord. Infections of the central nervous system are extremely dangerous, so I was extremely fortunate to be diagnosed quickly. The girl I was dating worked at a daycare. She had a regular parent-teacher conference one night and told me she was dreading having to tell one family that their 8-month-old was developmentally far behind compared to the other kids. He wasn't crawling yet and was barely able to pick up his head when lying on his back. She tells me that he's still a cute kid, but has a really big head. All of these are the typical signs of hydrocephalus, a condition where fluid gets trapped inside the brain. I asked her to have the parents see a neurosurgeon. The kid ended up having surgery to have a shunt placed, and has now developmentally almost caught up to his peers. At least they listened. I worked with kids for years at high-end daycares, and the parents were so sure that their baby was perfect. I had a kid with frickin' RSV for 3 weeks before they took him to the doctor. He almost died. Thanks for listening, parents. When I started medical school many years ago, my buddies and I, at different schools across North America, came home after our first year and noticed our friend Dave had lost a ton of weight. For the next few days, we all made fun of him as he ate a lot. Dozen donuts in one sitting sometimes, and he drank a lot of water. He felt crummy the next weekend. Breath was noticeably sweet, and we made the straight-out-of-the-textbook first-year med student diagnosis in our heads. We hauled him to the ER where they admitted him, diabetic ketoacidosis as the first presentation of type 1 diabetes mellitus, and started him on IV insulin. Dave went on to do many great things. Now, I'm not a doctor, but I love watching House, and this is important. My mum was a piano teacher, and had a student who broke her femur playing soccer. Full-speed collision with another girl, and it just snapped. Yuck. Anyway, she was having tons of problems in the hospital. Coded twice, respiratory issues. I remember watching an episode of House after the Super Bowl where he diagnoses the woman in Antarctica. The issue was an improperly set broken toe, which was throwing marrow into the bloodstream. I mentioned this to my mum when I heard about it. She mentioned it to the girl's mum. The mum brought it up to the doctors. No way. She coded again, so they made the doctors check. Yep, improperly set. Thanks, House. House saved my leg once. I had a flight right after having some pretty major surgery. I was getting a cast set and talking about a House episode where a deep-sea diver gets on a plane the day after a dive, and the pressure change causes him to almost explode. As I'm telling the nurse, she stops suddenly and says, "Oh my gosh, you're getting on a plane tomorrow." She proceeds to cut my cast off and just tape it in place so that my leg and foot had room to expand with the pressure changes. I had to go straight to a hospital after I got off the plane to have a new cast put on. I can't even imagine what would have happened if my leg or foot would have swelled to the extent it did with a skin-tight cast on. House is the man. Now, I'm just a humble EMT, but a few years ago I was leaving a movie. I stopped there to use the bathroom, and as I stood at the urinal, I was overcome by the smell of a GI bleed. Now, there were 3 or 4 people using the stalls, and there was a total of maybe 12 people in the bathroom. I didn't want to make things weird, so after some hemming and hawing, I decided my best course of action was to awkwardly yell, "One of you is bleeding from your digestive tract and you should go to the ER ASAP," as I ran out of the bathroom. Doctor here. My mother came home about 6 months ago and told me that a friend of the family had been having some difficulties for a week or so where he kept on bumping into things. He'd shrugged this off as just a virus and felt like it would clear up by itself. I asked if he was bumping into things on the same side all the time, and it turned out that he did. The left-hand side. This was a likely sign of spatial neglect or a loss of vision on one side. 2 possible manifestations of a stroke. A common cause of a stroke is atrial fibrillation, essentially an irregular heartbeat where the heart turns into a fun little stroke-making machine which fires clots up into your brain to block off the circulation. It's treatable though. I advised my mother that this guy should go to the hospital immediately to be assessed. He had the rhythm as suspected, and they shocked his heart back to normal rhythm. He was at a high risk of developing further strokes, and I believe he's doing quite well now. I work at a hospital, but not in a department that sees many life-threatening medical situations. A higher-up in my department went to a fundraiser with a bunch of other department heads, and found herself talking with a neurologist. When she started complaining about an on and off numbness in her fingers, the doctor noticed that her smile was a little uneven. Long story short, she got brain surgery the next day to remove a massive brain tumor. I'm thankful every day that I work with the doctors. I can't even imagine what I'd have done if that were me. Man, I'm almost scared to talk to anyone in a medical profession now. What weird and awful stuff am I exhibiting that's going to lead to me realizing I have a parasite laying eggs in my brain? Frankly, one is too many. I'm an optometrist, and I can spot a child with a vision defect at 10 feet. Not all, but particularly the far-sighted, amblyopic, and those with strabismus. Even a slight eye turn is so obvious to me, because I look at eye alignment over and over, day in, day out. My wife is a first-grade teacher, so obviously not a doctor, but frequently enough she tries to get parents to get their eyes checked out due to something she sees in the classroom. Essentially, kids can be struggling and perhaps even receiving services to try and help them close the gap. But then they go to the optometrist and it's like, oh, okay, they just couldn't frickin' see. The frustration comes from the fact that it sometimes takes months to convince them to go. My father is the public doctor in question. Every morning at 4:30 a.m., we do boxing and general fitness training. Dad was looking a bit crap and under the weather, but insisted that he was fine and that he just didn't get enough sleep. 45 minutes in, we were sparring and he started to go pale. I pointed this out to him and he just sort of freezes and tells me to get my phone and call an ambulance. He then proceeds to just drop like a sack of rocks. Turns out he had a blood clot in his carotid artery. He had to go into surgery for most of the day. Worst day of high school ever, not knowing if he was going to make it or not. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My whole family are doctors. Seriously, both my siblings, my mother, and my father are all doctors. I live abroad, but went home to visit my family over the Christmas holiday, and unfortunately had to leave my husband back in the UK. I got off the plane and I felt pretty crappy, but I just chalked it up to motion sickness from the long airplane ride. However, over the next few days, it just got worse and worse. I felt really nauseous and exhausted, and I had a terrible pain in my stomach. This went on for about a week. My mum was the first one who called it. She told me I was definitely pregnant. I completely denied it. I had an IUD and I hadn't missed a period. So in my mind, there was no way I could be pregnant. When my mum found out I had an IUD, she forced me to go to emergency immediately. It turned out to be an ectopic pregnancy. Luckily, they caught it very early, so no damage to my fallopian tubes or my reproductive future. But yeah, she definitely saved me. If I'd waited to go to the doctors after I'd returned home, it would have been way too late. So, very thankful for my genius mum, I won't be able to see her over the holidays this year, and now I really miss her. When I was 4 years old, my mum realized I was drinking an abnormal amount of water. She had to go to work at that time, she's a doctor, but she told my babysitter that if I asked for more water within the next hour, to give me warm water. Warm water is disgusting, and most children won't drink it. I, of course, asked for more water 5 minutes later, and my babysitter told my mum right away. My mum was home within 10 minutes, and I was in the ER 10 minutes later. Excessive thirst is a pretty common sign of high blood sugar, and my mum confirmed something was wrong with her hot water trick. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes that day. My mother, a trauma surgeon, is the worst person to fly with. So far, she's diverted 3 planes for people having in-flight medical issues and the plane not having enough or the right supplies for the flight to keep going. She once got into an argument with the pilot about whether or not the patient was sick enough to cause a diversion. Also, many years ago, she was at a high school football game and a kid broke his arm and had no pulse in his wrist, meaning the blood flow to his hand was cut off. She field set the bone to restore blood flow and then put him in the ambulance. Then she went back to her seat to watch the rest of the game. Nurse here. I was shopping for jeans and I noticed a suspicious lesion on a sales assistant's arm. Advised him to go get it checked out. Go back 2 months later and the same guy has a giant dressing over his arm protruding out of the shirt collar up his neck. He hugs me and says, "Thank you, it was a melanoma." Crazy. I'm in school now to become a physician assistant. One of our professors was telling us a story about his time in med school. They have actors come in to be patients for exams. I forget what the particular scenario was, but the patient had pretty significant edema that became visible in the exam. Our professor goes, "Do not do this during your examinations. I'm serious. Do not do this." What I did next was I turned to the camera, I said, "This is not part of my examination," and he turned to the actor and said, "Are you seeing someone about the edema on your legs?" The actor said, "No." The professor said, "Okay, you're not to have any salty foods until you do. After this exam, I want you to call your doctor, tell him or her you need to see them tomorrow." "Okay?" The actor says, "Okay." The professor turns back to the camera, "Okay, I'm resuming my examination," and he passed. My dad has been an anesthetist for many years now. He used to operate before monitors were common in the less developed parts of the world, and so used to monitor a patient's heartbeat by checking the pulse on the patient's wrists. Over time, he developed a habit from this, and when he handshakes anyone, his 2 fingers immediately go to the person's pulse. Once he met an acquaintance in the street, sensed from the handshake that something was wrong, and told him to go to the hospital ASAP because he had atrial fibrillation. Wow, that's like a superpower. I'm an ER nurse. When I first started working, I'd see a patient and think, "Oh wow, this person really needs to go to the hospital and needs a nurse." Then I realized, oh, they are, and that's me, and I panicked for a while. 911, what's your emergency? "Help me, please, I've been shot." "Oh crap, man, you should call 911. I'm a psychologist in training with a specialty in developmental disabilities. It's always tough when I'm in a social situation and I see a kid showing clear signs of autism, since early support can make a big difference. But it's very risky to even raise the possibility of such a huge bombshell outside of a professional setting. Graveyard resident nurse here. One day after I woke up, my husband said someone in our World of Warcraft guild was asking if anyone was a doctor or a nurse. So I logged on and talked to our guildie, who was having classic appendicitis symptoms, and I told him I thought he might have a hot epi. Didn't see him online for almost 24 hours. When he came back on, I asked how he was feeling. He said he was logging in from the hospital and he'd had his appendix removed. I was glad I could help. A little bit wild in my mind to have your online gaming community be your place to cry out, "Is anyone here a doctor?" Still, hardcore WoW players do apparently get pretty cozy in their little guilds. Don't know how many other games where you'd meet success with that request. You might get a hug in Helldivers. Actual doctor here. Had a janitor at the hospital I work at, who I was friendly with, stop by to shoot the breeze. Just small talk sort of stuff. He says, "I've been doing great, but my left leg's killing me." For whatever reason, I say, "Is it swollen?" No idea why, there's a million reasons for leg pain, it just came to me, and of course it is swollen. Right leg's normal. I say, "I think you have deep vein thrombosis, you need to get that checked, like today." Him, being a typical male, and I can say that because I do dumb crap all the time too, says, "Nah, I'll just tough it out." Long story short, I had to go to his boss to get him to the hospital. Clearly had a deep vein thrombosis, and if I recall correctly, had some small pulmonary embolisms. Super nice guy, he did fine. My cousin is a nurse, and I wanted a second opinion on one of my chesty bits, after seeing my doctor the previous day. I'd sent a photo of my chest, and my cousin replied, "Hospital, now." I had a mastitis turn abscess from feeding my kid. It was the worst case anyone at the hospital had seen. Heck, they had doctors, nurses, and students all coming to see my chest. By the time I had surgery, this infection was protruding and filled with blood and pus. It went red and swollen to pus and blood within 6 hours. It was huge. After surgery, they stuffed my chest with 5 feet of gauze. It was removed by one nurse who had zero clue that I had no painkillers in my system at that moment. I bawled and screamed in the shower as she ripped it all out. She apologized after realizing I felt every bit of that gauze coming out. Worst experience of my life, hands down. I had to have a nurse come daily and change my packing and bandages for 6 weeks because the gaping hole almost made me pass out after the gauze removal. Anywho, thank God my cousin told me to go. This made me cringe so hard. I'm glad you're okay now, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that. How the frick did your doctor not notice something that serious, though? The doctor obviously thought I wasn't listening to his instructions of hot and cold compresses and pumping frequently. Thing was, I was at the point that I was screaming into the mattress while pumping. I told him it was painful and he said that's normal. Completely ignored my concerns. I haven't gone back to him since. I had a friend call me to ask my advice. A mutual friend of ours was pregnant and at 35 weeks. They were all out to dinner and about to go see a movie when this mutual friend had mentioned she hadn't felt the baby move in about 10 hours. So my friend called to ask if they should call her doctor. I'm not a doctor, just someone who's been pregnant before, but even I knew that was bad news bears. I told them to forgo calling the doctor and just go to L&D to get monitored ASAP. They got her there and they found the baby had very low amniotic fluid and the blood oxygen levels were so low that the doctors were surprised the baby was still alive. Emergency C-section and baby and mum were fine. It still scares me to think that if they hadn't called or she'd never spoken up, what could have happened? My grandfather was walking up a hill and got a bit winded, more so than usual. He's diabetic, so he thought it may be related and played it off as if it was nothing. A week goes by and he's still complaining. Feels a constant pain in his chest and shortness of breath. Finally, he decoded to go see the doctor, who took one look at him and tells him to go across the street to the hospital. An EKG and a couple of tests later, and it turns out he had a heart attack and needed a quadruple bypass. Were it up to him, he'd never have even gone to the doctor in the first place. My father went in for an abdominal hernia surgery and was going to get put under for general anesthesia. He gets put under, and before he knows it, he's back. The surgeon and anesthesiologist both tell him that they couldn't complete the procedure because he went into atrial fibrillation, or AFib, and he should go see his cardiologist. Cardiologist ran some tests and suggests having an angiogram done. Turns out he had a 90% blockage in one artery and a 99% blockage in another. So it was time for him to join the Zipper Club with a double bypass surgery. In short, an aborted abdominal hernia correction procedure enabled my father to avoid a heart attack, probably saving his life. I'm not a doctor, but I'm a medical student in my final year. One day I was out in the city and I saw a man collapsed under this busy bridge. At first I thought it was just a drunk homeless man passed out, but as I got closer, it was clear that his whole body was jerking. Looked like a tonic-clonic seizure, characteristic of epilepsy, but it could also be other things. He'd hit his head pretty hard and nobody was helping, so I went and moved his legs out of the road. I tried to get him on his side and stuff. Called an ambulance and eventually the guy stopped seizing. Woke up, confused and exhausted, which is not uncommon. The ambulance arrives, the guy says he's never had a seizure before, his head is bleeding and he just straight up refuses to get in the ambulance despite the paramedics trying their hardest to convince him. All new seizures need to be investigated. It could be anything from a brain tumor to alcohol withdrawal, but nope, he didn't care. Wonder what happened to him in the end.
What's a harsh reality that everybody needs to hear? You can become disabled unexpectedly at any point in your life. Make sure you're taking advantage of the abilities you have while you have them. Seriously, the human body is amazing, resilient, and beautifully intricate. It is also fragile, complicated, and fallible. Never, ever ride in a car with your feet on the dash. Don't light those M80s in your hand. Don't dive headfirst into unfamiliar waters. Life is already trying to kill or maim you. Don't give it any help. There's something that traumatized me as a kid when we were learning about Ray Charles's life in music class. The man is famous for being a blind musician, but what I never knew until that day was the fact that he was neither born blind, nor did he get into a freak accident or something. He was literally just existing one day and suddenly his eyes stopped working. Literally lost all ability to see anything permanently out of nowhere with absolutely nothing he could have done to stop it or prepare for it. It gave me a deep phobia of suddenly becoming blind that took me a while to get over. Sometimes people will hurt you and they won't care how you feel about it. Yeah, I learned this through an excruciating experience with my now ex-husband. Even now, years later, I still can't wrap my head around how he went from love to literally not caring if I live or die. Waking up every day during that period, I'd be okay for a split second, and then the reality of what was happening would hit me. I guess I was naive, but I couldn't accept that he literally didn't care. Not everyone likes you. Some people won't like you for very arbitrary reasons, or for no reason at all. It takes way too much of your energy trying to make people like you. Use that energy on yourself and your loved ones. It's a life lesson I learned much later than I could have. It's a Star Trek reference, but a very realistic one. It is possible to make no mistake and still lose. That is not a weakness, that is life. Sometimes you need to accept you did everything within your power right, and it still went bad. And remember that this isn't something to beat yourself up over. These things happen. I also like the reverse of that. It's also possible to royally mess things up and still win. This one is both harsh and comforting. People don't think about you as much as you think they do. That means that your feelings might be ignored or not considered. People will forget things about you and might not remember things you've done together that were very memorable for you. And that can be hard to realize. On the other hand, they probably don't remember that embarrassing thing you did in high school, or they don't care about it. They notice patterns of behavior more than the occasional bad days that you have. So those times you feel bad about being off with someone, they probably don't think about them, unless they become frequent. Personally, I find that comforting. As David Foster Wallace wrote, you wouldn't worry so much about what other people thought of you if you realized how seldom they do. You don't realize the good/best times as they're happening. I'm trying to be more present as of recently. Since the pandemic, I've made some of the best friends I've ever had and try to keep in mind that one day I'll look back at this time period as some of my golden years. Pro tip: take pictures. Be the person you needed while you were growing up. This is the biggest lesson I've learned in my life. The only person you can really rely on is yourself. Just because you go out of your way for people, it doesn't mean they'll do the same for you. I've just recently learned this lesson. Having a bit of a cancer scare and told 2 friends last week, which both completely ignored it and continued to talk about themselves. I've seen them through breakups and family issues, and I couldn't even get a "damn, that sucks." It really messed with me. Life is not automatically easier just because you're a good person. I find the inverse is usually true. Having a moral compass and being a good person usually means you have a line in the sand somewhere, and there will always be someone who is willing to go further than you, undercut you, or outcompete you. You gotta walk your dogs. I heard someone put it this way, which really hit home. To you, it may feel like a chore, but to your dog, it's probably their favorite part of the day. Your trauma is not your fault, but it is your responsibility. This is a great one. I see a lot of people with parental issues struggle with this. I went to therapy and was diagnosed with PTSD from the way I was raised. The main thing my therapist told me was that it was 100% not my fault, but I am the one responsible for dealing with the fallout. It isn't fair, but it's the reality. I thought I'd be happy when I graduated college, or when I got my first apartment, or when I bought my first home. Don't expect happiness to be at the finish line. Happiness comes from yourself, in the now. Enjoy the process. Your first relationship most likely won't be your last. When I hear young girls say their first boyfriend is the love of their life, I just smile. That was me, madly in love at 15 and thought we'd be together forever. It makes me laugh. Thankful my first relationship was loving and respectful enough to make me hopeful for the next. I didn't expect mine to be, but 16 years later, here we are. The fact that we've grown and changed tremendously is something of which we've remained very conscious, however. Time and transition are inevitable forces which must be treated with due reverence. We do yearly, or more often as needed, state of the relationship check-ins, and waited to get married until our late 20s/early 30s. I'm far from a relationship expert, but it's worked for us so far. It won't just happen. I spent a lot of my early 20s being sad and defeatist, feeling sorry for myself. I always coped with this by telling myself that I'd make something of myself eventually, meet a woman eventually, be happy eventually. The truth is, eventually doesn't come if you don't make it come. Improvement has to be proactive. You can end up 40 years old, living with your parents, playing video games all day and with no motivation. Nothing will prevent that from happening other than you. The probability of you making it as a professional gamer/streamer/YouTuber isn't worth quitting your job. You have a higher chance of getting hit by a car or winning $1 million lottery. Not saying give up, but be realistic. Keep a job that'll pay the bills while you try. I know a guy who quit a salaried career track job to be a Twitch streamer once. He got up to 8 followers. Eminem is 50 years old. The harshest reality. Hard work won't guarantee a thing, but without it, you don't stand a chance. Life is not fair. Expecting it to be will always disappoint you. People will get special treatment for all kinds of things. It will never change. Not everyone has to run to the bathroom or hunch over in pain after consuming dairy. Those cramps, that gas, it's called lactose intolerance. Get Lactaid or give up the Captain Crunch. Boneless wings are just chicken nuggets. Now that's way too far, buddy. Your life can be changed forever in the blink of an eye. You have to deal with it or die. I'm 62. I went on errands one day with my beautiful wife of 42 years, and I came home 2 hours later a widower. She died of a massive heart attack in the passenger seat. That was 13 months ago. It's been hard, but I'm still here, thanks to some wonderful people in my life. You don't have as many friends or family as you think. I have a chronic illness, and the number of people who bailed on me during my hardest times only to pop up surprised I was upset with them once I started healing is truly disgusting. You've got a core few. Nurture those relationships like your life depends on it. Mine does. I remember reading one of those "This Is My Life" articles in a magazine about 20 years ago. It was about a woman who was in a fairly fresh relationship when her boyfriend became paralyzed. Despite not being in love with him, she stayed by his side to take care of him, giving her entire life up to do so, while every one of their mutual friends basically faded into the background. About 2 years later, she realized that she and her boyfriend were basically only still together due to him now being disabled. Despite a ton of guilt, she did the right thing and broke up with him. When she later ran into those same friends of theirs, they were incredibly unfriendly to her, treating her coldly because she had abandoned her boyfriend when he needed her. The world does not owe you understanding. If you have traumas and mental health issues, it's not everyone else's job to tiptoe around you and tolerate bad behavior you refuse to address for yourself. It doesn't owe you that, no. But kindness is free. You can choose to be kind to other people with trauma and mental health issues, and it will probably cost you nothing. So why would you make the choice not to? You can be the best employee in the company, but when illness comes, like cancer, they will change you with fresh meat. P.S. Personal experience. Saw it happen to someone that had even won an award in the company for his work and had a pretty high position. He got lupus and made the mistake of being honest with the company. They fired him. I have a chronic illness that caused my resume to look wild. The longest I've ever been able to work somewhere is 1.5 years because once I get a bad enough flare, I get fired. Doesn't matter how good of a worker I am or how hard I try, once I get too sick, I'm fired. Nobody cares. Just go for it. Everybody's busy with themselves to pay attention to what you're doing. Facts. A teacher in high school taught me that at the end of the day, nobody cares about you. Nobody is going to bed at night thinking of your problems. And it always stuck with me. Brutal honesty without tact is just brutality. You're not being as helpful as you think you are by claiming to offer other people harsh truths. A great phrase I've heard is there's a difference between being honest and weaponizing the truth. People who pride themselves on being brutally honest are more excited about getting to be brutal than they are interested in being honest. On the subject, I really like the quote, "I don't accept tough love from anyone who hasn't shown me gentle love." Youth is wasted on the young. Before you know it, you're 40, 50, wondering where the years went. So stop caring what people think about you. Ask him or her out. Start that business. Tell your family you love them, even if you're in a fight with them. You might be 30 thinking it's too late to do that thing you wanted to do. Do it now. Or else you'll be 40 wishing you had done it when you were 30. 50 wishing you had done it at 40. Just start it now. Working hard doesn't guarantee success. It may not guarantee it, but it sure increases the odds significantly. It also depends on the person's definition of success. For most of us, work is a business transaction. You're trading your time for money. Your employer isn't your friend, father, or mother. They owe you what they promised to give you in exchange for your time. That's it. If your work isn't fulfilling or making you happy, either spend your free time making yourself happy or work somewhere else. The few people who live in the wealthiest countries in the world still struggle to find happiness. Stop wanting what other people have because it looks like it makes them happy. They aren't any happier or better than you because they have things. Finally, while these facts suck for most of us, the sooner you internalize them and shift your values, the better you'll be. Most people should not be on social media of any kind because they cannot handle what it does to them mentally. It's not about socialization. It's about corporations monetizing your life. Many of us were the frog slowly boiled in the monetization of the internet. We started out when it was a place corporate media laughed at, and we had our space and our fun, we were left to ourselves. Slowly, ads and marketing and data collection creeped in, and none of us noticed the internet fundamentally changed. Some of us did, even subconsciously, but we were already engaged, habituated. Now it can seem very hard to pull away and find some meaningful life that isn't connected to everyone else 24/7. Children's first bullies are often their parents. It's very sad but true. A parent is often the first bully in the life of a child. They might not often be their bullies, but they are at most the first ones, and sadly many parents may even be unintentional bullies, causing more harm than good. Nobody wants to hear your music either from your car or from your headphoneless phone. I feel this one. I live near a busy street with a stoplight and people blast their music so loud it sounds like it's in my house. Loud music is one thing and I don't love that either, but man, this is a whole other level. You are responsible for your own happiness. But that doesn't mean that you have to make it alone. You make friends, ask for help, lift each other up. There's plenty of opportunities that we can look out for each other. If you're spending 30 minutes every day in the toilet after lunch and still saying you shouldn't have had Taco Bell for lunch, maybe it's time to see a doctor or stop going there for lunch. If you ate food from Taco Bell and expected not to be toilet bound for at least 30 minutes, then you might need to rethink your life choices and get a new toilet. The good old days were rarely good old days when we were young. Rose-colored glasses, nostalgia vision, whatever you want to call it, the good old days probably weren't as good as you're thinking. Yes, they were. I got to play RuneScape all day without any repercussions. When you buy a pet, know that you are in all likelihood going to outlive them. You need to mentally prepare yourself for that inevitable day. No, my pup and I talk every day about how she's going to live forever. A lot of success comes down to luck. People can work extremely hard, do everything right, be the most qualified / best person, and they totally get overlooked for someone else. A huge reason some people are winners and some people are losers is just straight up dumb luck. I'm very successful by almost any standard, but I used to be broke, friendless, and basically treated as useless / worthless. I went to college and worked hard, but yes, there was a lot of luck involved, and a little help from my family and the government. So many successful people I know are so deluded, they think that because they worked hard and succeeded, that's all it takes. It's not. Nobody knows what's happening. Not Buddhists, not Catholics, not governments, not feminists, not scientists, not capitalists, etc., etc., etc. No one. Obviously, no one knows everything, but I'd argue scientists know a lot more about certain information than other people. We're just electrical meat sacks made up of many other living things hurtling through space on a rock trying to understand why things do. Nobody exists on purpose, nobody belongs anywhere, everybody's gonna die, come watch TV. To those that do it, the internet isn't the reason why you bully. It's also not an excuse. You bully because you're projecting your own insecurities onto someone else. Also, just because you were bullied in high school doesn't mean you aren't a bully now. That high you get when you trash someone on Twitter and get a lot of affirmation from others? Yeah, you're being a bully. Reddit isn't the world, and getting downvotes or upvotes amount to nothing. Also, your waifu isn't real. I get the sense that a lot of people think Reddit is reflective of a perfect slice of humanity at large, and that's just not true. Your circle jerk means nothing. This ain't real life, kid. Enjoy your upvotes, but that's all they are. All animal life on this planet is going through a mass extinction. There's now 70% less today when compared to 1970, and that's caused by man. There are too many people on the planet. Its ability to support the existing human population could decline dramatically at any time. All of us will struggle to simply survive if/when this happens. In a conversation, most people aren't really listening to you. They're focused on when they can say their piece. Chances are you're doing this too. One of the best criticisms I got as a teenager was, "You're too busy thinking about what you're going to say to hear what I'm saying." It made me realize that as soon as I heard something I wanted to argue, I started building that argument and missed the rest of the comment. Making myself listen and learning to ask to make sure that what they said and what I heard was the same allowed me to become much better at resolving disagreements. The more important lesson I learned after that was how to let people be wrong. If it doesn't matter, I'm not going to worry about it. There will always be someone better than you at what you do best. Yep, and that's why you should only compare yourself to your previous self, not someone else. It's fine to look at others to see what might be possible for you, but you shouldn't use it to feel bad about yourself. Disliking popular things is not a personality. If everyone instead focused on what they liked, the world would be like 25% better overnight. The worst people are the best person to someone. They've done something good for someone. The best people are the worst to someone. They've done something bad to someone. People are dichotomous. They're gray. You can hate and love and fear the same person at the same time. Sometimes death is a kindness, but at the same time, everyone dies alone. Death is scary, and no matter how bad you feel, there is always something good. It may be something small, a pretty color, a nice texture, a good smell, a sweet note. On a lighter note, toast always falls jelly down.
Redditors who grew up filthy rich. What did you think was normal till you learned otherwise? Honestly, it was the little things. I knew we had nicer cars than average, a bigger house, went on more trips, etc., but I thought everyone's refrigerator had wood-paneled cabinet doors. For example, we had a Sub-Zero built-in refrigerator and freezer. The first time I saw a metal fridge, I thought it was weird, and I thought it was even weirder that the fridge and freezer were combined. But then I got really jealous because you could put magnets on it. I also thought everyone had a central vacuum system where you can sweep dirt into a little hole under the cabinets by the floor and it sucks it up. We had these little holes all over in every room, stuff like that. Yeah, we had those and a bunch of other crap I thought was normal but was not normal. We had touchscreen TVs that controlled the HVAC, security, and lights and sound system before touchscreens were even a thing. I'm talking mid-1990s. It wasn't even a flat screen. It was a deep dish TV with a touchscreen. I had personally never heard of a central vacuum system in all my 27 years on this planet, but now that they've explained what it is, I do believe I have in fact seen them. And they sound cool as hell. I would totally have one. However, on the topic of refrigerators, I will never be surprised at the lengths humanity will go to preserve and refrigerate food, and frankly, the sky is the limit with refrigerator technology. At least until we get Mr. Freeze-Ray from the Batman. Probably a weird example, but growing up, all of our dishes were made of fine china, Waterford glassware, etc. And I just thought that's what plates and stuff were made of because we didn't have anything else. Then one time I went to a friend's house for dinner and we ate on colored plastic plates and non-matching plastic cups. I just thought that was the weirdest thing ever and asked why we were eating with camping dishes. That's kind of rude, but when I was a kid, I didn't have a filter either. I just said whatever came to mind. I myself am not rich, but I have an uncle who is very well off. So one of my not rich aunts was complaining about her car acting up on her. Well, my cousin from the rich family was listening and got really confused. So he just asked her, well, why don't you just get rid of it and go buy another one? This kid was probably 13 or so at the time and had no concept of not enough money. He couldn't understand why you wouldn't just go get a new something if your old something didn't work.
Oh, to be young and naive and not understand how disposable income works or the value of it.
I would say rich in the area by comparison. I think the moment it really sunk in was during 5th or 6th grade around middle school. I felt like I was getting too cool for little kid parties, so I decided I wanted to go somewhere and do something fun. My parents were super excited about this, since it meant I was taking one stupid middle schooler with us on a mini trip instead of having 15 stupid middle schoolers in the house. I decided on a trip to some festival, which meant a ferry ride and then drive to a Canadian city and have a big fancy meal. The girl I picked had been my friend for years. I had no idea her life was so different. She lost her mind on the ferry. It was so fun. She had never seen Canada before, so we stopped and took her picture. My parents, realizing immediately that this was a huge deal for this girl, bought her and I souvenirs, which she later gave to her mom since her mom has never left the area. My mom would not let her order the cheapest thing on the menu, which I never realized is something poor children are trained to do. I thought you could just pick whatever you wanted to eat. She was the first person in her family to travel more than 30 miles from her house. This was pre-9/11, when a family could just take a random child with no ID and a permission slip from their parents into another country. We are both adults now and occasionally run into each other. She's married with 4 children and still talks about the time we rode a ferry and went to Canada. Had she not brought it up, I probably would have forgotten. It's probably just the words they used, but there's something about the way this individual writes that rubs me the wrong way. I don't know if they intended to, but yeah, whatever. I lived overseas for a year when I was in high school and attended an international school where, though my family was decidedly middle class in the US and my dad was being paid several times more to work abroad than he had been at home, I'm fairly certain my family were the least well off in the entire school. None of these kids ever seemed to realize how fabulously wealthy they were. A few examples. Several boys from North Korea. I don't know exactly how high up in the political world of the DPRK you need to be allowed to send your children abroad for an education, but these kids showed up to school in brand new Benzes for a start. One friend of mine lived in a luxury high-rise in the single richest enclave of the city where I lived. His parents lived on the 16th floor. Each floor was a single unit. He lived on the 17th floor, in his own unit. He had his own live-in maid and driver as well. Another friend's parents ran the largest import and export company in the country. He had 2 bodyguards and was driven around in his own armored bulletproof SUV. Windows were 2 inches thick and didn't roll down. I attended his birthday, which was on his dad's 180-foot super yacht. It was not uncommon for my friends to spend 3-day weekends in Bali, the Maldives, or wherever their vacation homes happened to be. I'm still friends with several of them through social media, and the most frequent post I see from several of them is off to blank for the week, then on to blank and blank, those locations almost always being on 3 separate continents. Rich North Koreans, I never thought I'd hear those words put together unless they were following up Kim Jong-un. My father was a successful chemical engineer/manufacturer and private pilot. I spent my childhood in a gated flying community with a fully functioning airport. Not only did we have a garage full of your everyday vehicles, we also had an airplane hangar full of classic cars that my daddy enjoyed restoring. World War II era warbirds as well as the modern 2-engine planes he used to fly to business meetings. We own property in Nantucket and St. Martin, and we're constantly taking extemporaneous vacations. John Travolta would walk over from time to time and shoot the breeze with my dad in our hangar up until he made Pulp Fiction and was slingshotted back into relevancy. I remember having playdates with his son, Jet, was also family friends with well-known NASCAR drivers and would spend a lot of time at their mansions hanging out with their kids, driving around on golf carts and shooting paintball guns. Everyone I knew had airplanes, nice cars, big homes, and what seemed like an endless supply of wealth. That was my normal. When I was about 4 years old, I made a new friend at school and was invited to spend the afternoon over at his house. It was an eye-opening experience, to say the very least, and when I returned home, still very confused, I remember saying something along the lines of, "Mommy, they live in a really small house and they don't have an airplane hangar." My mother was slightly horrified at the realization that this was my reality and had to explain to me that not everyone has the same things that we have. Life has changed a lot for me since the 90s. When I moved away for college, my dad suffered a series of mini-strokes which subsequently caused progressive dementia. Towards the end, he couldn't even tell you what year it was. My father passed away in January, and I've been spending a lot of time recently looking through old photo albums and listening to stories. Maybe that's why I felt compelled to share all of this with you guys. Being rich is nice, don't get me wrong, but I would give it all back in a heartbeat just to spend a little more time with the dad I used to know, the man who was the master of his own universe. There was still so much to learn from him, but what I'm left with are the cherished memories of my childhood that will forever put into perspective just how lucky I really was. Rocking it out with John Travolta post-Saturday Night Fever, flying planes? That sounds like the life to me. I've actually flown a plane once before. Other than that, sorry about your dad, mate.
One, I thought every family had staff. We had a chef, gardener, chauffeur, 2 nannies, handyman/errand guy, took care of the house, picked up dry cleaning, bought supplies, washed the dogs, handled maintenance and repairs, and 2 maids. These were full-time and several lived with us. We had a host of part-time staff as well. When I went to college, I was shocked by how everyone took care of themselves so well, when I barely knew how to tie my own shoes. 2. My private school had many Forbes 500 billionaire families, kids of world leaders, and general global establishment types. If we ever needed something anywhere, someone's parents or relatives or friend would have a connection. I just assumed that's how the world worked. 3. Money was always just an afterthought. Nobody ever asked anyone how much something cost. If you just liked something, you got it. Again, interacting with regular people in college was a huge eye-opener. 4. Respect. Everywhere I would go, either with my family or friends or their families, we were treated with what I understand now is a ridiculous amount of respect. It's hard to explain this one, but I think others in the same situation understand.
I feel like respect is a topic that we don't speak about enough nowadays, in that it isn't inherently given to you, but rather you are supposed to earn it. And I'm actually glad that this person, regardless of their social status or anything like that, is aware of this. And everyone should remember that. You don't owe anyone that you don't know personally respect. You only owe them an ounce of common human decency. Respect is earned through personal interaction. So, growing up, I knew my family and extended family was better off than others once high school came around, but it didn't really sink in until college. My parents immigrated from Iran to the US. I was a little kid and didn't have anything. My parents had engineering degrees, civil and computer, but my father wasn't allowed to work in our home country because he studied in the West. When we came here, they didn't speak English, so they couldn't work in their profession either. My mom stayed home, and my brother and me and my father worked several jobs. He saved up, along with a bit of money that was finally unfrozen, and started a small business. It grew very rapidly, but my parents didn't really change their own lifestyle. Since I was too young to really know what money is spent on when we were poor, it didn't really occur to me that we became rich. I just assumed this is what everyone in America did. The American dream, and that everyone else was like this, starts poor and then can afford all sorts of stuff. It didn't help that my middle school and high school were very split between rich and poor, so I figured the latter group was just in the process. I always heard college was expensive and some people could afford it, or that their parents had to save up or the kid had to get a job. I thought it was $1 million per year. I figured that seemed like something people couldn't afford. I based that on thinking that the lower class made $1 million a year, so spending a year's wage on 1 year of college would be unreasonable. Then I found out the average salary was less than my brother would spend partying in a weekend in college. Also, allowances growing up. I never had one, and everyone else did, so I figured they were all rich. Then one day I found out this girl I was seeing at the end of high school had an allowance of $50 a month, and it blew my mind. To my parents' credit, we immigrated to the States with nothing, and they built a business that was successful. Also raised us very frugal. My dad still drives a 2006 Jeep Liberty and my mom a 2009 Ford Expedition. My brother and a few cousins love spending, though. Edit. Turns out the Liberty is a 2001 and the Expedition is 2003. They taught us to be very disciplined and financially savvy. I worked my ass off to go down the route of being a physician and on the side started a business. They made sure they didn't help me financially so I could learn how it was to grow a business. Fast forward several years and it became successful enough that I focus on the business instead of being in medicine. I'm not far wealthier than they are and plan on giving the same type of discipline to my children. One of my best friends whom I met in college is very similar. His parents own a multi-million-dollar company and throughout school he had to have a job and pay for everything himself. Did anyone else think I sounded really cool when I said the American dream?
I'm not from a wealthy family, but my step-grandparents are really quite well off, living up in their mansion in the hills. 2 of my stepbrothers were fostered to them by their mother, while the unlucky third lived in squalor with her. I didn't even realize the double standard that was out there until one Christmas when the 2 fostered brothers got an Xbox 360 and 10 games each. The console had only just been released, whilst the other brother got a single game for his PlayStation 2 and a $20 note, and I got given the same thing. Despite not even being blood, and my father being hated by them. At some stage, my third stepbrother's existence reached critical mass and became an alcoholic. At age 8, a couple years ago, his mother and my father were outed as being addicts to certain illegal substances, which resulted in them having their children taken away by Child Protective Services at the behest of my grandparents, one of whom is very high up in child services. My 2 half-sisters were taken by my wonderful and somewhat well-off grandparents, one of whom works for child services and who are genuinely family-loving, intelligent people who gave a breath of fresh air and a better outlook on life to two girls who knew nothing of the sort, taking great care of them while my stepbrother got sent to live with his dad, the one who supplied him with his alcohol and an abuser of illegal substances himself. I have no idea where he is now, but I don't have high hopes for his future. Meanwhile, his brothers are at university making a future for themselves with everything all paid for them. Sorry for the rant which got sidetracked by the sad story of a very unlucky boy, but it is quite a good demonstration of the difference wealth can have on the outcome of your life, and how unlucky some people can be. Sure, the wealthy have their periods of bad luck, of course, but when you're already in a terrible situation, it tends to be compounded, and some people are too young to be able to deal with these kinds of things, or even have a semblance of influence on their own life, and it often leads them down dark roads that will likely perpetuate the cycle of poverty, or often simply just ending a promising young life. TLDR, have 3 stepbrothers. 2 were raised by wealthy grandparents and are well off and educated. 1 has lived a life of poverty and suffering, and as such, has a very bleak future in store, though he is only young.
That was honestly just kind of depressing, to be honest. My parents are filthy rich, but they try to keep us humble-ish, so our main house is actually our smallest. I thought it was small because every room feels essential. There's a kitchen, bedrooms, bathrooms, a casual dining room, a formal dining room, a family room, a lounge room, which is really just the formal family room, a study for each of my parents, a conservatory, 2 playrooms for the kids, again, one more formal than the other, a gym, a cellar, and an indoor pool. It was small in my head because I could name every room. Some of our other houses are big enough that they have a lot of random useless spaces that you don't know how to name. It has some couches in it. It's a sitting room. You get stuff like the lobby and the mezzanine. So I sort of thought that everything in our small house was essential. At age 10-ish, I was absolutely flummoxed to find that people put swimming pools outside. You may as well have told me that your bathroom was outside, like an old-style outhouse. Every one of our houses has a pool on the inside. I later found out that my parents did that on purpose because we're all pale as get out, and an outdoor pool would get us all very crispy and sunburned. Imagine my surprise when I found at about age 14 that some people didn't have pools at all. And then when I went to university that some people can't even swim. There was a lot of little stuff too. Everyone can eat with chopsticks, read music, know basic Latin, has a signet ring, or at least freaking know what one is, know which cutlery to use. I remember wondering if my friends were messing with me at a semi-formal university event in first year. It was a round table and no one knew which bread roll was theirs. Has an assortment of outfits of all possible dress codes ready to go at a moment's notice. Can I come to the gala tonight? Absolutely, no problem.
Suppose that you were sitting down at this table. The bread rolls are in front of you. Which bread roll would you take? The one on your left or the one on your right? Usually you would take the one on your left side. That is correct. But in a larger sense on society, that is wrong. Perhaps I could even substitute society with the universe. The correct answer is that it is determined by the one who takes his or her own bread roll first. Just a little Steel Ball Run reference for my fellow JoJo fans. I was always amazed that people didn't have a closet full of clothes like me. I know that sounds stupid, but I wore Gap, Tommy Hilfiger, and all that other nonsense, and my mom made sure we all looked amazing. My best friend had like 2 pairs of shorts from Goodwill. I literally could not believe it. I got in trouble for trying to give her my play clothes, which were all still designer clothes, just ones I had had for a couple years. That and cars. I remember asking my friend's mom why she was upset waiting for her dad to get home from work so she could use the car. Can't you just use yours? The concept that some families could only afford one car blew my mind. Granted, I wasn't filthy rich at all, but when I switched to public school in 5th grade, my choice, very against what my parents wanted, my new friends all were in shock at my neighborhood and house. To me, it was just normal. All my private school friends had much bigger homes than me, some even with private planes. I am probably so wrong, but I always kind of think when someone has a private jet, that is like the 1%. I didn't necessarily grow up super rich, but my dad made between $500 and $750K a year while growing up. I think he makes closer to $750 to $1 mil now, and I had a few moments like this. My dad is usually a frugal person, but since he grew up poor, he afforded himself some luxuries. It wasn't until at least high school that I realized how out of the ordinary it was for both of my parents to have $30,000 watches.
I think the biggest shock was college. It was totally paid for by my parents. They paid out of a 529 plan, but for my sister now and brother after they never set one up and are just paying right out of salary. I knew kids would have to take debt on, but I honestly thought until about a year ago, just graduated last May, that most kids would graduate with 10K debt max. It wasn't until just recently I learned some kids were taking on double that or more each year. It shocked me. And also made me thank my parents extensively for saving me from 100K or more debt by paying for college. I wouldn't say I was filthy rich, but I was definitely given a lot of advantages and head starts in life because of my dad's money. I can't imagine what growing up with an extremely rich parent gets you advantage-wise if my dad was able to give me everything he has. The only money I really think about regularly is my money, but it's kind of crazy to think about the different echelons of richness there are. Late to the party. Before my dad died, he was murdered when I was 7, we were super rich. He owned his own company and my mom owned her own business as well. I was telling my boyfriend the other day how she'd take us to the mall and just hand each of her 3 kids $500 and tell us to go wild for no reason. After he died, we fell into poverty and my mom went basically insane and lost the house, companies, and declared bankruptcy.
Well, that was genuinely a terrible tragedy what happened to your father and mother, but that is a superhero origin story right there. That's all for now, but if you've got a recommendation for the kind of topics you'd like to see us talk about on this channel, then why don't you drop a comment below and tell us what you like. Also, if you've got a recommendation for me and what kind of voices you'd like to hear me do,
I could do a pretty good solid snake.
What would be a funny thing to say to a surgeon before anesthesia kicks in 5 seconds later? I'd broken my wrist and was being put under to have 4 pins inserted. They gave me anesthesia through an IV, and I felt coldness spreading up my arm and across my chest. The nurse asked how I was doing, and I said, "This must be what dying feels like." I heard her say, "Oh my God," and then I was out. So, did you die? Yes. Dude, I broke my wrist too. 4 pins and a plate, same exact sensation, comment, and a shocked face response from the anesthesiast. Are you me? You're me reincarnated. Can't believe you're dead. Yeah, the worst part is how much the Wi-Fi in this casket sucks. I'm sure the Wi-Fi will be the least of his worries once his battery dies. Wow, I actually have a relevant story that happened recently. As I was getting ready to go under, they were placing a device in my mouth to keep me from biting down on the scope they were going to use for the endoscopy. Think medical ball gag, but a hard plastic ring instead of a ball. As the gal was placing it in, I asked, "Wait, what's the safe word?" I heard a good amount of laughing as the world turned black. "I'm awake" would probably be a good safe word. Related comment, but doesn't really answer the question. My dad was in the middle of a surgery repairing some pretty nasty damage on his wrist after a skiing accident. He was under heavy anesthesia, but the surgeons were having serious trouble with the screws in his wrist, which apparently jarred him around enough to wake him up. He noticed their struggles and managed to say, "Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey." Then he passed back out. This is the most dad thing I've ever heard. How do you keep a surgeon in suspense? This is the best one yet. Shame it's buried so deep in the thread. It's over my head. Explanation, please? Okay, here's what it means. I hate you so much for that joke. Before going under for wisdom teeth, the doctors said I might feel funny. They pushed the drugs and asked if I felt any different. My butthole, and only my butthole, began to itch like crazy. And it was hot. Not warm, hot, like I just ate peppers with my butt. I told them my butthole is itching like crazy, and the assistant was really bad at holding back a laugh. The doc resisted mightily, but he too succumbed to my newly discovered butthole emotions. They actually gave me some kind of drug that had the exact same effect when I had surgery. They warned me prior though, and I kind of laughed it off until it actually happened. Newly Discovered Butthole Emotions is the title of my memoir. As the anesthesiologist was putting me under, he said I'd start to feel sleepy soon. I asked him, aren't I supposed to be counting back from 100 or something? He replied, I don't know, I must have skipped that class. Being an anesthesiologist must be awesome as you can always get the last word in. The last anesthesiologist I had messed with me too. He asked what I did for a living, so I told him. And he said, wow, that's a cool job. I wish I'd done something like that instead of this. Ugh. Well, bye. And I was out. But I woke up laughing, which was great for an otherwise stressful and confusing day. Got my spleen out a few years back. My anesthesiologist said, did you get some photos of that thing? Because once we got it, it's gone. Right before I blacked out. Those guys have always been my favorite every time I've had surgery. They're so chill and funny, and somehow that doesn't concern me since they're the ones basically keeping you alive. Had surgery about a year ago. As the anesthesiologist was getting me ready, he asked me if I'd done anything fun recently. I'd just gotten back from the Sasquatch Music Festival, so I told him that. Last thing I remember him saying was, well, this will feel more like a Grateful Dead concert. I was being put under for a wisdom tooth extraction a few years back, and it was the first time I'd ever had anesthesia. They used injection method rather than the gas, so they told me to watch the fluids going in so I could gauge when I'd feel sleepy. I had this idea I would say something like, "Oh no, doc, I've lost my eyesight," or something else preposterous. Before I could collect my thoughts, I just immediately blurted, "Well, and passed out. Last time I went under, as I started to fade, I said, "You're gonna have to drive, I'm messed up." Probably came out, "You're gonna have to drive, I'm messed up." I said something similar, except it was when I woke up. The doc asked how I was feeling, and I said, "Fine, I've been drunker than this before. Good thing I'm not driving." I was seriously messed when I woke up from that chair. Despite what I said, I have never been so drunk I needed a wheelchair and 2 people to get me in the car. When I had my exploratory laparotomy for ovarian cancer, I wrote on my chest, "Insert superpowers here," with the arrow pointing down to the incision site. Waking from anesthesia one time, I heard someone say, "His blood pressure is a little high." Then I mumbled, "That must be the anesthesiast assistant's fault." Then they kind of startled and asked quickly, "Why's that?" Becoming slightly more coherent, I continued to say, "She's really hot." They all laughed and said, "He'll be fine," and released me from there. I had some temporary amnesia after waking up from an hour-long emergency surgery. My girlfriend was there and found me staring puzzled at her. "Hey, Sleepy, it's me, your girlfriend." Me. "Wow, I must be a lucky dude." Happily together for more than 2 years now. Plot twist, the assistant was a big hairy dude. I'm okay with that. So after my dad had a triple bypass and was just waking up and they'd removed the breathing tube, I was in the room with him. I said something along the lines of, "Everything went perfect with your surgery, Dad, no problems." My dad in his drug haze said, "That is because I am a perfect specimen of the human male and it couldn't have gone any other way." Nurses were cracking up. If he was a perfect specimen, he wouldn't have needed a triple bypass now, would he? Got to admit they have a point. If something goes wrong and I go into a coma, don't you dare cut my coma beard. Yes, ma'am. I had to get some surgery that involved cutting open my head. Right before they gassed me, I said, "I should warn you, there's a spooky skeleton in there." The last thing I remember is his response of, "I'll try to look out for that." Did they find it? I don't know if they found it, but I'm pretty sure part of it escaped. If I don't make it through this, then tell my wife I want her to be buried alive with me. If I don't make it out alive, tell my wife I changed the Netflix password and she'll never know it. You're a sick person. Tell my wife I love her. Work ethic. Or just, if I don't make it through this, tell my wife. I would hope someone would tell her. They had a thing checking my heart and it fell off and it flatlined. I told them, "Oh no, you've killed me. Quick, we're losing me." For a second, I thought it was referring to your heart, like your heart fell out onto the floor. It was an awful botched wisdom tooth extraction. I tend to get massive erections while under anesthesia, but it's fine, just tape it down if it gets in the way. We'll just cover it with this thimble. Yo, let me know if you see my phone in there. This is so dumb yet so good. Keeping this for my next colonoscopy. When I got my wisdom teeth out, the dentist's office was right next to a funeral home. I told the guy that if anything went horribly wrong, they could just take me next door. Mother and doctor were not amused. I mean, at least it's close and convenient. As they were pushing the drugs, they asked me to count down backwards from 10. All I could say was no. The room erupted with laughter and I was out. When I was a kid, they told me to count back from 10, so I did. I got all the way to 0 and all the doctors were looking at one another extremely confused. Then, just before they were about to do something, I conked out. I had my wisdom teeth out a couple weeks ago. I really hate the idea of going unconscious, so when they told me it's starting and if I wanted to count backwards from 10, I was like, don't tell me. I wanted to just pretend like I was falling asleep on my own. That seems entirely reasonable to me. They told me to breathe in and that I would pass out by the 3rd breath. 1 breath later and I'm waking up in the waking room. They never even gave me a chance. Can you count backwards from 10? Will I, or am I able to? I had my appendix removed in 2007. I was in the prep room about to get on the anesthesia and the anesthesiologist kept asking me what my name was as he was about to put me under. After 3 times, I remember saying, even though I keep saying it, I just forgot. Crap. And then I was out. I had to have a pilonidal cyst removed from my butt crack and can remember giggling like a madman because I asked the entire operating room, so who drew the short straw and has to shave my butt? The honest answer to that question is the medical student. I shaved so many butts, and then you have to take tape and use it to collect all the shaved hairs so they don't get all over the sterile field. Ugh. So glad I'm not going into surgery. When I had my wisdom teeth removed and was given general anesthetic, I apparently said, if this is what being on drugs is like, sign me up. He went and told on me to my mother. I said a similar thing when I had minor surgery done. I got shot up with something to take the edge off before they rolled me into the operating room. I remember announcing that the drug they gave me felt like being drunk, but without all the calories. Apparently, I spent a good amount of time telling the dentist all about my aunt's goat farm. When the doctor told my mom this, she replied, his aunt doesn't have a goat farm. The fact that you said if should be good news for her. It would have been worse if you had said, these are the best drugs I've had since that Colombian gap year. Luckily, I cried about going home to feed my pet hamster. I never had a pet hamster. Same experience, but apparently I said, man, I need to do this again. I asked for a tummy tuck while being wheeled in for a bowel resection. I said, while you're cutting it open, just cut some off. Then when I was done with my surgery, but still pretty messed up on drugs, I asked if I was skinny and then cried when my doctor told me he didn't give me the tummy tuck. I asked for a tummy tuck after both of my C-sections. Doc gave me the same answer each time. I make it work, I don't make it pretty. I went in for an endoscopy and colonoscopy, or as the staff referred to it, a double. Before they put me under, the doc asked if I had any questions. I said, just so I'm clear, you're putting a tube in my mouth and in my rear, right? Right. Can you put it in my mouth first? Don't worry, if we start in the other end, we'll just spit on it and wipe it off. That's hilarious. I love when they're jokey. When doctors are too serious, it makes me uncomfortable. Right before I went under to have surgery on my septum, I was about to start counting backwards before they put the mask on, and I asked, does anyone need anything while I'm out? The last thing I remember was an OR room full of people laughing hysterically. I'm gonna need to get surgery just so I can use this. Legit Bill Murray level. I like it. The other way around, I was cracking jokes with the nurses and anesthesiologist before a big surgery and everyone was laughing. Anesthesiologist turns to me and says, well, it's not fair that you're the only one not on anything, and then hit me with the anesthesia and I was out. Haha, that's awesome. First thing on waking up, run hands over own body to make sure all parts are there. Seriously though, you could wake up feeling pretty scared after that. I said to my doctor during my wisdom teeth extraction, Doc, don't start, I'm still awake. To which he said, we're already done. Those drugs are legit. Actually, it's scary just how much you don't feel time pass while under those drugs. Last thing I remember on my last wisdom tooth surgery, I told the dentist that I worked with food grade nitrous and that it might take a small amount more. Don't know if I said anything afterward. I woke up in their recovery room. To the surgeon and nurse, I just want you both to know, good luck. We're all counting on you. I'd imagine you waking up several times during surgery to say that line again. Pre-op, Marco. Post-op, Polo. Simple, straight to the point, no fluffer. This is perfect. Pre, Legend. Post, Dairy. I told them that I hadn't pooped that morning, and if I pooped on them, it's their fault for scheduling the surgery at 6 a.m. Then I passed out. Well, don't leave us hanging, did you? Nah, painkiller's so good, I didn't poop for a week. I feel like as the doctor in this situation, you'd just be on guard the entire time. Last time I went under, I started to feel a sort of paralysis and couldn't move. Me. Whoa, did you just give me something? Nurse. Yes, just relax and don't fight it. Me. Okay, but you should sell this stuff in the gift shop. Everybody laughs. Surgeon. Are you okay? Me. Yeah, but I'm disappointed there's no cake. Surgeon. On the recovery notes, write, give the patient cake. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in the recovery room with a slice of chocolate cake on the table next to me. I should have asked for cake. Hell yeah, free cake. I'm envisioning an episode of Seinfeld where George figures out he can get free cake by this simple little trick and ends up having multiple operations just for more cake. I do have to say though, kudos to the doctor for taking care of all their patients' needs. My wife went to the dentist last weekend. After several shots of numbing, she sang to him, I can't feel my face when I'm with you. To the dentist's credit, without batting an eyelid, he replied in full voice, 'cause I numbed it. When my appendix burst, I was being wheeled in, and as the doctor was getting ready and I was about to pass out, he said, geez, this is rusty, and held up a scalpel. I could tell he was joking, and off I went to sleep. When I woke up, he came to check on me, and the first thing he said was, have you seen my watch? I swear, he was a very funny man, and it really helped calm me down in a situation where I nearly died. Okay, so I know this is late in the thread, but when I was 15, I had tight foreskin around my penis and I opted for circumcision. My doctor, Dr. Lenz, was the funniest dude I've ever met. He told me I was gonna have something like a frankenpenis for a month or two, but it's cool. Anyways, I'm in the OR on Christmas Eve and I feel the anesthesia starting to kick in, and before Dr. Lenz walks out, I shout/slur, "Doc, please just take care of the little guy." And he stops, turns around, bows to me and says, as if he were my own. I laughed once and passed out. I was being wheeled into emergency abdominal surgery once and my girlfriend was with me. We're rolling down the hall and they have the mask out to put me under, and I pause and I say to her, "Don't let them touch my penis." The nurse smirked a little and they put the mask on me. In a somewhat panicked fashion, I pulled the mask off, stared up at my girlfriend, and with full weight and seriousness told her they can look at it, but no touching. I heard the doctor laughing as the gas kicked in. Best part is there's a good chance they gave you a catheter. I had a nervous moment when I had my surgery when the nurse came in afterwards and says, "Okay, we need to take the catheter out." I did a double take and said, "I feel like this is something I should have noticed." That and the first thing I said when I woke up was telling my nurse she was beautiful and then immediately puking blood. Don't worry, I'm sure she was charmed by your interaction. Similar, I had some kidney stones and they had to go up there to unblock my parts, if you know what I mean. As I was waking up from anesthesia, I apparently asked, how many people saw my pee-pee? A few minutes later, as I was a little more coherent, I asked the nurse what's the craziest thing she heard from someone waking up from anesthesia. Her answer, how many people saw my pee-pee? Good times. So, how many people saw your pee-pee? Never actually got an answer, but I would probably say 4 or 5. It's just funny because who calls it a pee-pee after their 5th birthday? Who's the guy with the scythe standing in the corner? Oh, that's the other surgeon. He's just sitting in. I just went under this past week. I told my doctor, I better not wake up with any penises drawn on my face. The room had a laugh and I went to sleep, and they performed the worst magic trick ever and made a camera disappear up my butt. I remember being a celeb at the hospital after I said, I love my girlfriend because she's got big boobies. When I'd go in, I'd have doctors and nurses teasing me. I was 16 at the time. Here's to relapsing. This is so wrong, I'll have to remember it. If the doc doesn't realize you're joking, this is a great way to not get prescribed any real pain medication for after the surgery. I beat the anesthesia. Had a patient fight anesthesia once. After his head hit the pillow, the anesthesiologist said, "Resistance is futile." I laughed so hard at this, my cab driver literally just asked me if I was okay. A couple of years ago, while I was being prepped for bone surgery, I had a good rapport with the anesthesiologist. My dad is one, and we kept talking about pain management and such. He pushed the dose of ketamine and propofol into my IV and my brain was getting foggy. I remember seeing him laughing as I went to sleep. When I woke up, my friend who was attending the surgery told me that while I was dozing off, I told the surgeon, "This is my very first time trying ketamine unrecreationally." Hopefully he doesn't say anything to your dad at the next conference.
What was your high school's tragedy? We had this one teacher. She was the Quest teacher. It was a health class, basically. She talked about sexual education and the dangers of smoking, that sort of thing. We got to sit on couches in a big circle rather than desks in rows. She sadly contracted breast cancer, and it was pretty bad. She went bald from the chemo and had a port installed on her chest so they could just inject into that since they had already destroyed all the veins on her arms and whatnot. Despite all this hardship, she was one of the warmest, sweetest, most cheerful, and most loving people I have ever met. I'll always remember one particular thing that she said. She talked about going to a friend's funeral recently. The friend had died an agonizing and slow death from cancer. My teacher wore a brightly colored floral pattern dress while everyone else was wearing black. She did this because she was not mourning. She was celebrating the end of her friend's suffering. She had accepted death and made peace with it, and knew that it was just the natural course of life. She died a year later and the whole school was devastated, and I made sure to wear bright colors. I think that was actually rather beautiful. It's a natural thing as people to either deal with the death of those we love or our own expiration, but the fact of the matter is death is a natural part of life that we simply have to accept at some time or another. A girl named Joy, who was insanely happy and nice and popular, had an aneurysm and died. She was uncharacteristically mean that day and told everyone she had a headache. It happened in the hallway, and she just kinda slumped against the lockers. We found her when classes let out. One kid said, "Joy's here in the hall." A huge jock dude picked her up and took her to the nurse, and someone called 911. She had been dead for some time by then. Saddest thing I ever saw. She was the sweetest person. Ate lunch with the special kids a few times a month. She was a sophomore and insanely popular. She was really tiny, and at one time, at a dance, a weird rap mosh pit formed. Joy got to crowd surf. She really resembled a tiny, fairy-like girl. Our whole school mourned her for months. It's always a tragedy when a kind young person has their life inexplicably and suddenly taken away. I hope you rest in peace, Joy. I was only in 9th grade at the time. I think he was in 10th or 11th. But the dude was a stellar wrestler and all-around very nice guy. He would help the newer kids, like myself, in practice and give us tips on how to get better. Good-looking, friendly. You know, the typical star athlete that everyone loved. One night, he was at AmITheA getting some groceries and was carjacked with his friends. They drove them both in their car about 5 counties away, told them to get out, put their shirts on their heads, and told them to run into the woods. As they did, they were shot. The friend managed to get away. I think he was wounded, but Louis was shot in the head. God, it's been years. This happened in the late 90s, but I can remember the dude like it was yesterday. It was a very sad time for our school. Here's a little story about how I met Louis and ended up on the wrestling team. I actually got caught skipping school by Coach Perry, wrestling and gym coach, in the 9th grade. I was very small, maybe 5'5", and like 105 pounds. I was playing Pokemon Red and Blue with a friend in the stairs that no one used that led up to the weight room. Coach Perry came in looking for some equipment. They used this stairwell as a storage closet. You really couldn't even go upstairs all the way because of everything blocking it. Nava was with him, helping him drag out mats for wrestling practice. My friend was immediately excused and sent back to class. I was told to help them get the mats out, which I did. I was afraid I was going to be suspended or that he was going to call my parents. I remember Louis patting me on the back and telling me everything was cool and that Coach Perry was going to make me an offer. After the mats were set up, Coach Perry and Nava talked for a moment, then called me over to a scale. I was told to get on. I weighed in at 104 or something like that, and Coach Perry and Louis just smiled. I was then told I had 2 choices: join the wrestling team or be taken to the offices to get rode up. Naturally, I chose wrestling and was running around the gym in a trash bag that evening. I literally knew nothing about wrestling. The stances, points, and everything else were unknown to me. After practice, we had scrims and I had to go against the 110 guys. I remember Louis taking me aside and showing me this killer leg swoop and grab. He let me practice it on him a few times, then I did it for real in the scrim. I remember it went perfect. Kid never knew what hit him and I put him on his back. Louis came over, gave me a high five and a big slap on the back, walked over to the coach and said, "Looks like we found our new 105 guy." 2 weeks or so later, he was dead. To this day, I still don't think I thanked him enough for being so cool to a freshman like that. He made sure I felt like I belonged on the team and wasn't just there to get out of trouble. Just a small story to show you the kind of dude Louis was. Always willing to help and a class act. Just a good all-round dude. I had planned on quitting after a few practices, but after his death, I stayed on the team for the full season. Just didn't seem right, because Louis would never have quit. This was both tragic and beautiful. Louis Nava, you sound like an absolute angel. I hope you rest in peace while your killers suck eggplants in hell. You know what I mean by that. Coach Perry, it sounds like an authority figure that you need at a school. Someone who is not only willing to dole out punishment where necessary, but also offer opportunity to someone who then went on to do a full season of wrestling, which they wouldn't have done otherwise. It's beautiful how these people helped inspire you, but also unbelievably tragic, which is why I say, people, you should cherish everyone that you meet and know, because anything can happen in this crazy world. Shying away from a death post, Catholic high school. 2 of our favorite teachers who had actually made their classes engaging and opened up their classroom to anybody needing a hand in school and in life had both divorced before they had started teaching there. They decided to move in together after dating for 2 years and were planning on getting married the next year. They kept it all quiet out of pure professionalism, and somehow administration found out and fired both of them. I believe for breaking the school's code of conduct for teachers by cohabiting before marriage. We lost 2 of the best teachers in our school that helped out and inspired their students in every way they could try to. This one actually makes me sad because a good teacher is really hard to find. When I was a kid, I did not appreciate my opportunity in education very often. I would be disrupting. If I was in a bad mood, I would have standoffs with
with teachers, and I just didn't really care. But now as an adult with that past, I greatly appreciate education, and I think everyone should. Teachers already have a hard time dealing with kids that disrespect them, but also when it's like administrative rules like that, the only thing I can really say is hopefully that didn't stop their plans of getting married, and I hope they still have each other. But at the end of the day, it still really sucks because now this school has been deprived of two people that seemingly really cared about education. In my final year of high school, there was an absolute poo storm regarding personal information that was accessed by half the grade using a teacher's login details. We had the password for years and used it to check marks and ranks of schoolwork, and all was good. In the final weeks of high school, some idiot decides to change his English mark, moving himself from 33rd to 3rd. The school obviously finds out, and everyone who is involved gets in trouble. The kid that changed his marks obviously got expelled, while the other half of the grade all got punished by not being permitted to attend the school formal and graduation. Next thing I know, everyone's starting a huge protest and some CEO or something gets involved and revoked the punishment because parents were threatening to get lawyers or something. Considering the teachers gave out the password willingly to another student and the school refused to admit the teacher's mistake, aggressively trying to blame the students for hacking when that simply wasn't the case. That one was honestly refreshing compared to everything else that we've been reading through, but don't get your hopes up, it is not about to get much happier. We had a teacher that for some reason everyone took a dislike to. He wasn't that bad or strict, but for some reason everyone hated him. I was in class once and we locked him in his equipment cupboard. Stuff like that regularly happened to him. He never really used to say anything, just kinda got on with it. Eventually, he split from his wife and lost his driving license for drink driving. He ended up having to get the bus in the morning with everyone traveling to school. As always, everyone was really cruel to him. Halfway through year 9, he decided to commit self-deletion. The worst thing about that was that everyone found it really funny. Adult me is feeling very ashamed of teenage me right now. Edit. Yes, I'm aware of how awful this story is. The man was clearly battling some severe depression at the time. This was roughly 18 years ago in the Midlands, UK. He taught woodwork. No, he wasn't physically pushed into his equipment cupboard. He used to go in there to get equipment and drink alcohol. One day when he was in there for a long period, someone just locked the door. I can't remember how long for, but it was during a 2-hour session and he was outside for most of it. I'm hoping that it was just a couple of minutes, but it could have been longer. I didn't get the school bus and only had his class for one term. This was a problem the whole school were involved in. There were roughly 1,250 students in the school. Everyone in the school had this same outlook towards him. He had previously gotten into arguments with parents, although I don't know the reason for this. The teachers knew about it, but I think with his drinking issues, they weren't sure how to handle it. They were very slow in telling us that he had died, and by the time they figured out how to address the issue, everyone knew. So I think no one knew how to handle the situation. No one reveled in his death, no one knew what to do, and I think the jokes may have been people's attempt at handling the situation. So for one thing, I'm glad that this person feels bad about the way that this individual was treated. You shouldn't feel bad about it all your life because you probably didn't have like a direct hand in it by any means, but I'm glad you feel bad. So I picked this story out specifically because I come from the Midlands of the UK, specifically the West Midlands, based on the calculations of when it was posted and the 18 years. I was not in high school at this point, it seems. But seriously, if you find someone who's being treated like utter crap for seemingly no reason whatsoever, just check on them, please. Like, a bit of kindness goes a real long way, and it can even maybe prevent someone from making a stupid decision. This was just really sad. We had 3 heart-wrenching, oddly connected tragedies in 1 year. When I was a junior, a girl lost control of her car and crashed. The impact ended her life, but her 2 passengers were okay. She was a wonderfully nice girl, always smiling, participating in an ROTC drill team. The school was shaken by her sudden passing. I attended her funeral and cried my eyes out, wondering how her family managed to not cry 24/7. My brother was a pallbearer. A month later, a senior boy crashed into another vehicle while on his way to an ROTC drill team practice early in the morning, way before school started. He was the captain of the team, a quiet leader, gifted, known for solving Rubik's Cubes in class. My brother. He was comatose. The pallbearer's carnation from the girl's funeral was still on his desk. Its water had been poured out, and the white flower was dying slowly. As if that wasn't enough, a sophomore boy was involved in a collision just a few days later when he was leaving the school. He died instantly. Oddly enough, he was involved in ROTC extracurriculars too. The news hit me like a ton of bricks as I sat in the hospital's waiting room. My brother died in the hospital about a week later. I was allowed to stay home for the rest of the school year. At his funeral, I understood why the family of the deceased doesn't sob their way through the service. We had moved to a place beyond tears. We finally took his old furniture out of his room today. I cried thinking about the pallbearer's carnation sitting on his desk. My high school's tragedy will follow me for the rest of my life. I totally get that part about the being beyond tears bit when you're at a funeral. I have not had that many losses in my family until about 3 years ago with my grandmother, and it was heartbreaking. I won't go into details, but I completely understand. Rest in peace to all of those people. Countless. One student was run over by an 18-wheeler in front of his family. One very popular teacher went home one day feeling ill and passed away 2 days later from cancer he didn't know he had. 2 different teachers committed self-deletion, multiple drunk driving deaths, a drug-related multiple murder, another drug-related murder, a CP case, a teacher who molested several students, and one student allegedly killed by the Boston bomber years before the bombing. I think that just sounds like a cursed school. I'm so sorry to the victims of those occurrences that didn't die, and rest in peace to those that did. I gotta say, I have picked some really depressing topics to talk about on this channel, like, goddamn, strap in, people. An English/drama teacher got a role on a late-night TV show. Got the twins out on TV and had to quit teaching. Was a tragedy for us that she left. She was a hot younger teacher, and suddenly drama class had a lot less male students. I do hope you enjoyed that slightly funny one while you can, because it's about to get a little depressing again. We had a security guard named Creighton. He was the most kind-hearted man you will have ever met. He smiled at everyone and was open to talking to you no matter who you were. I remember him overseeing detention, and it was my first time during my freshman year. He walked up to me, and I was scared to bits, and he told me, "You see this room? Don't ever come back here. You're better than it. Don't let me down." I never got in trouble again because of him. Senior year, he was diagnosed with cancer, and it was already too late. He became this skinny ghost of what he used to be, but he continued to smile and cheer up everyone's lives until his last day alive. The day he passed, I think the entire school cried. I credit him for making me who I am today, because of how supportive he was. Like I said, man, you just gotta check on people, show them some support, give them some motivating words or something, you know? It doesn't work for everyone, I'm not gonna lie to you, but goddamn. Rest in peace, Creighton. I have 2 stories to tell. One is the story that affected me the most personally, and the other is a story that shows the true courage and strength of a guy I did not personally know. The first 2 stories begins with a German kid, me, who moved to the States and started going to American school. Once I was in middle school, a boy named Blake approached me and started asking me to translate this long list of words he had made to German, asking me to sound them out for him so that he could learn. He was obsessed with World War II and the Germans, so he began to befriend me. I personally thought he was incredibly annoying. One day he invited me over and I decided why not and went to his home. Ever since, we became best friends. Once high school rolled around, I was more focused on school and he began hanging out with the wrong crowd. We both had carpentry classes and shared this big senior locker to keep our tools in. I was working for a friend's dad when I got a call that he had gone out drinking and got into a fatal car accident. His car hit a semi-truck. He got knocked unconscious and his car was on fire. My middle school best friend burned to death and all they could find were his teeth. I still tear up thinking about it. The worst part is all of a sudden everyone that barely knew him is acting like they were his best pals, and some girl that he dated for 3 months got to speak at his funeral. Yet I didn't even get to sit up front because all 150 people that knew him seemed to show up because it was the popular thing to do. I can't be too bitter though, because I'm glad that many people showed up for him. The worst part was cleaning out his side of the locker. That honestly still haunts me today. Rest in peace, Blake. The second story I'm not too familiar with, only that 3 friends were driving back from somewhere on the highway in a 2-seater coupe. The friend in the middle wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and they got into an accident. However, the guy in the passenger seat moved over to grab the guy sitting in the middle, which saved his life. But he himself was thrown through the glass window several yards and was fatally wounded. His last words were, "I'm sorry," and he died there on the concrete outside of his friend's car.
I'm not religious, but for Blake's sake, I hope there is a God, and that one day I'll see him again. But not the Blake I knew in high school. I want to see the Blake I knew in middle school. This one was sort of interesting because a similar thing actually happened in my high school where someone I did personally know died. I wasn't amazing friends with them or anything, but I chose to silently mourn them and stay at school the day while a lot of people across the year group went to attend the funeral because they wanted an early day off school, even though a lot of them didn't actually know him. This will probably get buried, but I have to participate in this. My high school was known in the area for having a sophomore curse, where something awful happened to a sophomore every year. Obviously, that's silly, but it just always ended up being true. The year I was a sophomore, a girl I'd been in school with my entire life, but wasn't close friends with, died of rabies. I heard that she had been bitten by a raccoon while taking out garbage. Also heard that she was uncharacteristically mean and angry a few days before her death. I had always known her to be exceptionally shy and quiet, probably sweet, but I can't say I really knew that. It happened very suddenly. She was out of school for what I heard was the flu, and then maybe a day and a half later, she died. Her parents still release butterflies in our town every year on the anniversary. She was an only child. I wish I had sent them a card or something. The tragedy that was more personal to me, though, was a guy who had died in a car accident. He was driving in the rain and his car flipped over into a creek and he drowned. We were really close. He was 1 year older than me, but we'd been in a program that mixed 2 grades together since first grade. He'd been one of my first boyfriends when that meant making out on marching band trips. And we'd been on school trips to big cities together. The night the accident happened, I had been chatting with him on AOL Instant Messenger when he said he had to go meet our other friends to go see Star Wars. A few hours later, that friend called me asking if I had spoken to him because he'd never shown up. Crazy thing is, I thought absolutely nothing about it at the time. I just figured he got distracted or his mom had decided not to let him go. He was also a very treasured only child, just like the girl from my grade. The next morning, I got to school, and everything was completely quiet. It was so eerie to see no one saying anything, everyone just staring and crying. I walked up to the door of my homeroom already sure that something horrible had happened, but I hadn't made the connection. Another close friend was standing outside the door staring off into space. I asked him what was going on with everyone, and he just said his name died last night, in this chilling monotone. Before I could even form a thought, my mouth was filled with vomit. Not sure why my body reacted that way, but I spent an hour on the bathroom floor sobbing and puking until my mom came to get me. I still can't even write about it without tearing up. Rest in peace to both of those people, but this has just made me think about how lucky I am that I did not have a very close, personal, or important friend, ripped from me at a young age or anything like that. My God. So in my state flowers are illegal to pull out of the ground, but not illegal to buy and plant. Even on private property, you can be fined huge amounts of money per flower removed. Some seniors wanted to pull a prank by planting state flowers on the brand new football stadium field in the shape of 2008. And on top of 2008, they decided to also plant flowers in the shape of a phallic symbol, roughly 35 yards in length. None of them thought to check to see how much each flower would cost to remove. $5,000. The school, which was privately owned, couldn't possibly pay to remove the over 200 flowers the seniors planted, so every football game that season was played on top of a phallic symbol made of flowers. Eventually, someone was willing to break the law in order to remove them, and when we came in on a Monday, they were gone. They even filled the gaps with sod. Also, since then, the law has changed so that all you have to do to remove them is have a state representative present during the process, and you must replant them. So maybe some good came out of it. Also, the seniors were never caught or never announced publicly. That is honestly pretty funny, and I am so glad that I could end this on a slightly more upbeat note. This was kind of hard to read through to some degree, but all the stories were very interesting and really made me think about stuff.
What is your bullet frickin' dodge story? I had trouble breathing and had been wheezing for a few months. Figured it was just bronchitis that I get all the time, and got some antibiotics. Figured what the hell, I guess I should ask a doctor. You know, the people trained in figuring this stuff out. Found a tumor the size of a pineapple wrapped around my heart and lungs. Jesus Christ of Nazareth. Definitely should have gone earlier, but so glad I actually decided to go. Edit. I'm alive, everyone. Sorry for the delay. Haha. For those commenting about the size of the tumor, it was a little over 5 by 3 inches and went from my trachea to my diaphragm. Double edit. 2.5 years cancer-free. Actually, as of yesterday. Didn't realize until today. Haha. Weird coincidence. At the time, it was not very good. I got to watch my pericardial drain surgery that night because they were afraid the anesthesia would make my trachea collapse. So I got to watch a surgery on myself, awake. Had to be at a 45-degree angle or the weight of the tumor pressed on my lungs, and under nothing except local anest for the catheter site. I like to think it's something not many people can say they've done. Advancing the catheter felt like slowly having the wind knocked out of you, but without the impact. I could actually feel almost exactly where it was as it went. Probably one of the most unique feelings I've ever felt. I could also feel the pop when they pierced my pericardium, and I could feel a very slight pressure relief as they drained the fluid initially.
First of all, I could not imagine being awake for my own surgery, but I guess a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do. And second, I don't know either, but where it's like, pop, I always just think about the bit from Superman versus the Elite. You can almost hear the pop. Lived outside St. Louis in my early childhood, woke up screaming in the worst pain of my life, and then I felt my face get sprinkled with something. I actually got shot in the hip, and when I sat up, a bullet went through my window right where my head was just at, and what sprinkled me in the face was tiny pieces of glass. So I dodged a literal bullet by taking a bullet. Edit. Really expected this to get lost in the sauce, but here are some details someone else asked about. So my bed was right next to my bedroom window, parallel to the wall. The end of the bed where my head was at was right next to the window. The bullet entered the wall and struck me in my left hip, so I guess I was sleeping on my stomach. The windows were real weird now that I think about it. It was actually 2 single-pane pieces of glass separated by 6 inches, and since both of them had a hole in them, you could stick a rod in and see that the bullet traveled right where my head had just been on my pillow. Edit. Another side story connected to this now that I think about those windows. One time I came home from school, I noticed the inner window shattered and there was blood all over the place. Turned out it was my dog that tried to launch herself through the window. We were pretty certain that someone was at my window scoping it out. She was super defensive of all of us. I'm pretty sure this actually occurred after the shooting. Yeah, I'll admit, living in England my whole life, I don't think I could ever feel really, truly comfortable unless I am within a brick house. Not me, but I had a hand in it. Knew this guy in high school peripherally. He was in the cool crowd of rocker-type guys, and I was a nerd. New girl arrived at our school from another town. She and I became friends, and a few months later, she started dating him. At first, she seemed cool, and we would talk about everything. At one point, however, she started talking about how she's been hooking up with her ex-boyfriend behind cool guy's back. Just before the end of the school year, she tells me she's pregnant, and that she knows it belongs to her ex-boyfriend. She's laughing and really proud of herself because cool guy is going to do the right thing. Withdraw his college application, go work at the local gas station to support her and the baby. Her ex, the father of the baby, is kind of a loser, so she thinks it's the best thing even that she can screw him while making cool guy support her. I didn't really know this guy that well, but I got his phone number from an acquaintance of mine who knew it. Cool guy knew I was friends with this girl, but was still pretty surprised to hear from me. I told him all about her ploy and said, "Get a paternity test. It isn't yours." This guy was incredibly stoic, but after a sizable pause, he just broke down crying for a few minutes. He then thanked me, they broke up, and cool guy went to college and made something of himself. Just a good old story about bros looking out for bros. Damn girl, how could you even try and do that to cool guy? He's cool guy.
When I was 7, I got lost in Spain without my family. I had been lost for about 5 hours, really late at night, and had been going down some dark alleyways and car parks. I started asking random strangers if they spoke English, but they were only middle-aged men walking around alone. One guy didn't speak English, but he gave me a cuddle and took me back to his house around the corner. At this point, I'm crying my eyes out and just appreciated the help and kindness. When I got to his house, it turned out that he had a family, and the son was learning English in school. He got out his school workbook and asked me my name, and then they took me to the police station. My parents picked me up about 10 minutes later as they were driving around in a police car. That man could have been anyone, and I could have been kidnapped and never seen again. Not your ordinary bullet dodge.
Honestly, that is such a tough call. You're 7 years old in a foreign country and you are dead lost. Oh, God. I mean, I guess, yeah, eventually you'd have to just go, sod it, I'm going to rely on the kindness of strangers, but straight up, I thought that story was going to get a lot worse before it got better. I had my police car pulled over off the side of this rural road with the emergency lights on. I had stopped because there was a man splayed out in the middle of the asphalt. Turns out he was super drunk and decided to take a nap during his walk home. I had just helped him to his feet and placed him in the back of the car to drive him home when I hear an engine revving hard. I closed the car door and straightened up, just in time to have my car smashed out from in front of me by a pickup truck. I felt the truck's side mirror clip my body armor. The driver was drunk and had decided to go looking for his drunk friend. That friend was the guy I just picked up. The guy in the back seat survived the impact because those old Crown Victorias had massive trunks. The driver went to the hospital, and in the coming months he pled guilty for impaired driving. I remember the collision analysis showed the guy hit my car at 145 kilometers an hour. It was a wild night, and I still have major hang-ups when I have to stop my police car on roadways. I have a good amount of respect for police. I don't think every cop is on the up and up, but if you've ever seen any of those like body cam footage things where stuff just hits the fan, my God, police, especially police in America, go through some wild stuff. New teachers started at my high school at the start of the year, integrated fine. Students were assigned a pair of teachers to pay special attention to their academic needs. He was one of mine. Because of this, he knew I had a tense relationship with my parents. Because of the occasional sensitive material we covered in his English class, which I also took, he knew I had a telling sensitivity to sexual violence. As a teacher, he knew I was a troubled kid with a shaky support network. He gave me off-base but evidently well-intentioned advice about managing my controlling parents, worked with me and my other overseeing teacher to try and make school less nightmarish for me, and overall seemed like a warm, engaging guy. He gave some people the willies, but I felt fine around him. Then, middle of the week, a few months into the year, he doesn't show up. We're told he's not employed here anymore. No official details. As you maybe guessed, turned out he had an alleged history of sexually abusing students at past jobs. I don't know how it had been handled that they were able to find this out without him having tripped any of the flags I assume exist in the screening for potential teachers, but I guess better late than never. I don't think the school ever got, prosecuted for screwing up or whatever, so I guess it was an understandable miss. But yeah, that would have been pretty freaking awful. I got lucky. Me and any other kids, he might have been charming. For the sake of keeping it fresh on the first take, I was going in with a wizard voice, and then I kind of went, I don't think I want to use the wizard voice on this anymore. It got a little dark.
Dated this guy briefly in college. He got into a horse riding accident early on in the relationship. Horse fell on him, broke his ankle, pelvis, and hip. Apparently had a prior addiction to pain pills I was completely oblivious to. He quickly relapsed and turned into a crazy pill-popping psycho. Tried sticking out and helping him. I did my best and I couldn't handle it. When I told him I was done with the relationship, he proceeded to call me the worst names in the world, begged me to forgive him, and then tried asking me to come hang out after he had called me the biggest harlot in town. WTF. He then started doing harder stuff and has been involved in a hit-and-run accident. The guy he hit died. X moved the body, fled the scene, dumped his truck in a car park that had surveillance cameras in it. He did get caught for it. Talk about a bullet dodged. I've had some pretty crappy relationships, apparently.
I think this is quite exemplary of the downward spiral that drugs can take you in. I mean, this dude was apparently riding horses one day, and then he's doing hit and runs and dumping bodies and stuff. Seriously, kids, stay away from hardcore drugs. God. I met him on one of those sites that isn't just a dating site, but is a dating site to find someone who shares your particular interests, and we seemed compatible enough to meet. I much prefer talking face-to-face, so once I see someone might be interesting, I generally set up a face-to-face date right away. We decided to meet halfway and we'd figure out where to eat once we were there. So we met in the parking lot and I got in his car and he drove us around until we found a restaurant we both liked. We sat down and immediately he started chatting. He was fairly charming about it, but it got really creepy really quick because he seemed to move the conversation onto every person I interacted with. And once he established how close I was to them, how often I saw them, texted them, talked to them, it's like he would look satisfied for a moment and then move on to the next. It's hard to really explain, but I would tell a story about me and a friend and he would ignore every part of the story and just go straight to questioning me about my friend. The only thing he seemed interested about them was how often I interacted with them. Like, for example, stuff like this. Him. Are you guys close? Me. Fairly. Him. How often do you hang out?
Me, a few times a week. He nods and brings the conversation to coworkers, asking me what my boss was like. Was I always on time? And he just did that over and over. I mentioned my parents, and he wants to know if I'm a good girl who goes to see them every weekend, if I talk to my mom or dad on the phone every night. I mean, he would bring it in with stories and from a teasing tone, but he did it over and over with every person I mentioned interacting with. It got creepy, and I was freaking out in the back of my head, and it was getting really hard not to get up and just leave. Awkwardness scares me more than getting kidnapped, though, and having to call someone to give me a ride because I thought the guy was interviewing me to be his next victim just sounded nuts in an already intense situation for me. I just started lying my butt off, so I mentioned brothers. He, of course, asked how many. I said 5 and started going into vivid detail about how overprotective they are, how they check in on me constantly, how one is a cop, the other is a private investigator, etc. I also mentioned how my friends make me do a safety call. Either I was paranoid or it worked because he did take me back to my car and I got to drive away and never contact that guy again. I figure if the guy was casing my life out, those would be red flags for him.
I'm not gonna lie, I would probably have the exact same thought process as this person. It takes even less than that for me to stop and consider whether or not my date or someone in my general vicinity is plotting my downfall at any time.
Back in my raving days in the early 2000s, before it got trendy, I got deep into e-use and subsequently became a small-time dealer. Small-time over the course of a few months rapidly became pretty big. One night after re-upping, buying more Scooby snacks to sell, I went over to my buddy's house to play Counter-Strike until the early hours of the morning. On my way home, I got pulled over. I had 2,500 green triangle Scooby snacks in my trunk. I pulled out my license and registration, laid it out on my lap before the cop came to my window and proceeded to be as polite as possible. The cop asked me why my eyes were red and asked if I smoked the ganja. I said absolutely not. I never liked the ganja. Weird, I know. And I told him we were playing Counter-Strike for an 8-hour-plus session, and that's probably why. He ran my license, which was clean, came back to my car and said, "Okay, drive safely and let me go." I left that scene bricking it. Had he looked in my trunk, I would have been arrested and looking at a distribution felony and at least 12 to 25 years. Not to mention, it would have destroyed my life. I stopped dealing and raving after that. Today, I have a lovely wife, my own home, good health, thriving business, healthy toddler, and another one on the way. Talk about bullet dodged. My life and the life of those I love would have been drastically different if it played out the other way. It should have. I am the lucky one. I lose sleep often thinking about that. Edit. Wow, thanks for all the encouraging words and upvotes. For those of you who are critical of my choice to slang E, you need to realize that my customers were all adults with free will. Some prominent doctors, lawyers, teachers, etc. The choices we all make in life, and the consequences of those choices fall on us, period. I didn't make the drugs or import them. I didn't force anyone. I've actually cut people off many times. And today's society is frankly too quick to blame everyone else but the person, ourselves. Stop that. For those saying I got a lucky pass and need to pay it forward, I totally agree. My life changed from that day on.
Now, I don't have that much respect for drug dealers by any means, but I am happy that this person is keeping their nose clean now and living a decent life. I really agree with the sentiment about personal responsibility. That is an issue that I think a lot of people really don't understand anymore. You just got to think about your actions, how it will impact you, how it might follow you in the future before you do something. Go watch the Back to the Future trilogy. That's basically the core of that entire thing. How your actions, how your decisions can have a terrible outcome in the future.
Well, just recently I had a job offer, which never felt right in my gut. After the initial excitement of actually getting an offer wore off, I was feeling kind of meh towards the position, but figured I could do it for a year or two since it would potentially allow for a better quality of life. However, when reading the contract, so many warning bells went off in my head. My husband works in employment and labor law, so I had him review the contract.
The first words out of his mouth last night were, "Don't sign that contract as it is." Some highlights include, keep in mind I work in K-12 education, not some extremely secretive cutthroat industry, a 1-year no-compete clause for any tangentially related position in the entire county, which, keep in mind, has the largest school district. 60 days written notice if I were to leave, not crazy at first, but good luck getting a new job over the summer, which is when most schools post positions. If I decided not to return after signing a contract, I'd have to reimburse all insurance benefits starting from July 1st, 2017. Not sure if these are standard in other industries, but I've never seen anything like this as a teacher. Basically, it would make it close to impossible to leave the job, and I could potentially be screwed so many ways if I did. If this was what was in the contract, what could the work environment be like? Just sent off my thanks but no thanks email to the director with the school year quickly approaching. Looks like I'll be back at my current employer.
Read your contracts, kids. I know I don't. No, I pay other people to read them for me. The city was doing road construction in front of our place about 3 years ago. It was annoying, noisy, and covered everything with fine dust. During this time frame, my son ended up catching some sort of bug, or so we thought, that seemed a lot worse at night. 3 nights in a row, he ended up jumping out of bed after throwing up all over the place and having diarrhea. It was awful. We would spend hours just rubbing his back and cleaning him up. I would then put him to bed in the spare bedroom and he would pass out completely exhausted. After the 3rd night, I went on a cleaning spree and was basically scouring the hell out of everything to get the sick air out of the house, when I discovered that damn dust from the road construction was coating everything with this grimy blackish residue that was incredibly hard to remove, or what I thought was road dust. I was irate enough that I took a pic and posted it on Facebook and was whinging about the construction and asking if anyone else was having the same issue. A couple hours later, I get a message from a friend that asked if we had an oil furnace. I thought it was odd, but just said that, yes, we do, and asked why she asked. She then proceeded to tell me that all her ceiling fans and vents, etc. looked exactly like my pic did when her furnace filter got clogged and wasn't burning off the oil properly, which in turn filled her house with carbon monoxide. I totally went into preservation mode and packed everyone into the truck and drove around the corner to the fire station. Firemen came in their trucks with their carbon monoxide detectors, and sure as hell the basement was highly toxic and was filling the house. My son's room is directly above the furnace room, and when the heat was kicking in at night, he was getting poisoned. We are all lucky to be alive, especially my boy. Our landlord installed carbon monoxide detectors 2 days later after the house aired out and the furnace guy did his repairs. Scary stuff, kids. So I actually do laboring. I've never done road work before, but God, I can only imagine how bad the road dust is for you. But I did a lot of soft strip demolition work, really. And when I was working like 10-hour shifts a day, I would do like 50-hour weeks or something like that, just moving stuff around for these guys. Loads of people would not wear their mask when it's like we've just been breaking down walls and there's loads of construction dust everywhere. And obviously as a voice actor, I want to protect my voice and everything. But I would just know all these guys that would take 12 smoke breaks a day or something, probably more, and still just be breathing in this dust because they didn't want to wear a mask. And I'm like, dude, you are ridiculous. Your lungs are going to be messed up in the future. Whew, I'm so glad that the story didn't end in tragedy, but that's why it's a bullet dodge story. I told this to my dental hygienist recently and she thought it was funny, so here you go. My friend owned this camp in the mountains. When it wasn't in season, he brought a bunch of friends up to hang out. So it's very late at night and he goes to get some people at the front entrance and leaves me and another friend alone. We decide to do the zip line over this pond. As my friend is explaining to me, you're going to feel a yank after you jump off. I just tell him, go and I'll see what you're talking about. He goes and looks awesome. Now keep in mind, it's pitch black outside, so I ready myself and jump. I feel the little hitch he was talking about, but something isn't right. As I conclude that something indeed isn't right, it feels like I get hit with a pickup truck in the back. I was falling about 25 feet without even knowing and landed perfectly on my back in about 1.5 feet of water. The rope snapped. Any other rotation would have left me severely injured or dead. My friend thought I died, but I got up and met him around the corner. My back looked like I had been shot point blank with about 50 paintballs. Other than that, I was fine. Well, that is some divine luck. Like, they didn't even realize they were falling. It was that dark. God damn, they are one lucky SOB. I was in Windhoek, Namibia doing the post-college wanderer thing. I was hitting the bars when I randomly bumped into an Australian guy I'd met a few weeks earlier in Harare, Zimbabwe. Harare is an epic crapburg, so there's nothing to do but get drunk and wait for your flight/bus out while you regret your decision to visit Harare. This Australian dude was my companion on the drinking, waiting, and regretting part, but we were going to different cities and parted ways when we left. So we randomly meet again in Windhoek and quickly decide that we need to get smashing drunk, just like 3-week-old times. Namibia is a great place to get drunk in mostly safe streets, the animus and energy of African nightlife, and relic German colonial predilection for extraordinary beer. As we're at the bar getting blasted out of our minds on 35 varieties of Namibian lagers, this gal comes up and starts flirting with me. She's smoking hot, great conversation for a couple hours, and she ends up asking if I want to come back to her place. I hadn't gotten laid in months and was 22 years old, feeling frisky as hell, but I said no. Something just didn't seem right. I tell my buddy that I'm going to call it a night and go back to my hostel. He asks if I minded if he made a go at the girl. I tell him sure, but something seems weird about her. I go back and pass out. I woke up with a screaming hangover the next day and spend the entire day in bed. I spend a couple more days in Windhoek, 10 out of 10 town by the way, highly recommend, but don't come across him again. I didn't expect to, so no big deal. I buy a ride west across the desert to Swakopmund and spend a few days hanging out there, and I run into my friend looking like a wreck. Turns out the chick took him back to her place, got him blackout drunk, took literally everything he owned except for the clothes he was wearing, and ditched him 3 miles outside the city in the desert. He tried to hitchhike his way back to the hostel but didn't know where he was and ended up on the back of a pickup truck going the wrong direction, depositing him in Swakopmund. Really glad I let my brain overrule my one-eyed monster in that situation. It doesn't happen often, but I'm glad when it does. Dodged a bullet. Now, I won't go into detail, but as a gentleman who has taken some pretty big risks in some cases, this Australian dude is just on another level. He's either more daring or more naive than I am, because I would never go with someone that I didn't really trust in a foreign country that I didn't speak the language in, to a location that I'm unaware of or anything like that. Hell, I'm surprised that they would just go wandering like that and then just get absolutely trashed, because man, anyone could take advantage of you, really.
What have you witnessed someone do that made you realize he or she is really smart? My wife's grandfather. He's a retired electrical engineer with a dozen patents to his name and a long list of recognitions I can't be bothered to remember or name. I always knew he was brilliant, but never realized just how until one day last year we were visiting and he got a phone call. Keep in mind he's been retired for 20 years and is 86 years old. The phone call was from an electrical engineering firm from halfway across the globe asking if they could fly him out to a site and have him consult on the energy capture of a hydroelectric dam they were building. They'd run into a problem that none of them, all the electrical engineers, could solve. They had consulted 3 of the top university departments in the US on the issue, and the last one had referred them to him. 20 minutes on the phone and he agreed to think about it. 2 days later, he'd solved their issue and written the solution on a single 8x11 sheet of paper which he scanned and emailed to the company. He said he took so long to write it up because he didn't want to have to fly all the way out there at his age. His explanation was so clear I was able to understand and follow it with no relevant higher education. I spent a year trying to track down an intermittent issue with my car. An older gentleman on the forum had suggested a likely cause, but I disregarded it as the parts had already been replaced. Sure enough, he was right, and I managed to follow from that to find the other half of the problem. Saved me so much trouble. I had a mechanic look at it, I'd spent hours tearing my hair out trying to fix it. Nothing worked prior to that. Respect your elders, folks. He should write a book / at the bare minimum document what he knows so that it can be converted to a book or just published publicly. He's clearly an expert in his field and his knowledge is invaluable. Everything he can write down can only better humanity. He has contributed to several textbooks over the years. He sounds like the kind of guy you should just sit down one day and say, "Tell me everything you know." Better pack a lunch though. One time, my drunk uncle was in jail and needed bail money, and being that my dad was the only one in the family with any real savings, they all looked to him to fork up 100% of the cash. Having been asked, he realized the situation had 2 possible outcomes. 1, pay for his bail and never get the money back, or 2, not pay for the bail and the whole family blame him for it. So my dad decided to throw them a curveball. He told them that whatever the rest of the family raised for the bail, he'll not only match it, but he'll offer double what they raised together. Nobody offered 1 cent. Blame averted. Well, I'm certainly going to recycle this if the need ever arises. I hate that though. I've had friends who've been the only ones in their family that had their act together despite all odds. Somehow they end up becoming monetarily responsible for others' consistently poor decision-making skills. This can probably be used in a lot of situations where I'm dealing with would-be deadbeats, totally stealing it. I had a teacher in high school that, using both hands, could write a sentence starting from the beginning and the end simultaneously. He even split the middle word of the sentence. He also spoke around 5 languages. I had one like that. She could write in English and Greek simultaneously. I was playing the card game Egyptian Rat Screw with some friends, and then all of us noticed that one of our friends was slapping a bit too fast to be believed. It turns out he was counting all of our cards and had each of our decks memorized, which is just insane. Maybe it was just my group of friends, but you had to do that to come anywhere near winning. Each game would literally last an hour or two and be amazingly fast-paced. 4 of us played every day, and it would literally be our cardio workout for the day. Everyone who would watch us would think we were just randomly slapping a pile of cards. My older brother was always terrible at school. I can remember him straight up asking why he needed to graduate high school and then again in college. He then accepted a low-level job after graduation in marketing that ultimately fell apart due to the company executives screwing up big time. During all of it, he somehow was able to keep a small client, and within 7 months of working, was promoted to their executive marketing director, making 6 figures. Now he has multiple clients on the side and is always scheming something up. The dude is as hard-headed as they come, but nonetheless is a marketing genius. Blows my mind how far he's come. I was once in Chinatown and I saw this old Chinese guy with a bunch of groceries. He tied the bags together by the handle and slung them over his shoulder. He looked ridiculous. The next week, I was struggling with a lot of groceries and I remembered the old Chinese guy, stopped on the sidewalk, tied all my bags together, and walked home like the unencumbered dork I became that day. In high school, I had a friend who we made fun of all the time for being dumb, but he would have the wackiest ideas that would somehow work. One time, around Christmas of my sophomore year, a few of us decided to buy a 30-pack, and then later decided we didn't feel like drinking it that night. I couldn't keep it at my house, but one of my friend's parents was coming to pick all my buddies up. Nobody knew how they were going to get the 30 out of my house and to one of their houses. Then my friend came up with the genius idea. He went upstairs to my house, wrapped the 30 in wrapping paper. He then decided to carry it out right in front of the car with our friend's mom waiting and say it was a gift for his girlfriend who he was going to be seeing later that night. I realized that not being great at school doesn't mean someone isn't a genius. Intelligence comes in many forms. Sure, someone might not be able to do high-level math, but they could fix parts of your car you've never heard of. I knew 2 guys in undergraduate who would play mental chess. As they'd pass in the hall, one guy would say, "Knight to Queen 3" or whatever. The other guy would roll back his eyes for a second and then nod to acknowledge the move. Both guys then kept walking in opposite directions. Later that day when they passed again, the second guy would declare his counter move. The game could last days and they never forgot where any of the pieces were. Each had a mental image of the board. Sure, they might have been faking, but these guys were always first and second on the dean's honor list for all 4 years of my undergraduate. I knew them pretty well. I think the mental chess was legit. Most really good players can do this. Once someone becomes familiar enough with the game, it becomes a lot easier to recognize patterns. Of course, intelligence is advantageous to get good at chess. Did they ever get pissed off and mentally flip the board over? Knight to floor, rook to floor, queen to floor, king to floor. It's all about knowing the game and the related statistics. One of my favorite stories from my college football days is how well some players can recognize patterns and statistics and combine that with their physical prowess. There was a safety on my team that went to the NFL, still playing, who could answer every coverage question or situational scenario with almost 100% accuracy. Anybody who can explain highly complex things very simply. It takes an intelligent person to understand it, but it takes a brilliant person to grasp it so fully they can dumb it down to explain it to anybody. I think it was Feynman who tried to write an introductory textbook on some obscure topic and concluded that more research was needed because he was unable to explain the topic simply enough. I've always found it amazing how most people think they're super smart, but when you ask them to break things down, they're completely unable. In fact, most will then get angry at you or think you're stupid for asking them to break things down. Elevating complexity to simplicity is pure genius. I was at my desk waiting to make a purchase over the phone, and I mentioned to a coworker that I always have to pull my credit card out. I should have this number memorized by now. Another coworker overheard that and said, "I know your Visa number," and spit it right out. After I got off the phone, I asked him, "What was that?" And he said he heard me say it a couple weeks earlier. Numbers just stick with him that way. I already knew he was a bright guy, but that took it up a notch. I'd ask him very politely to not ruin your life. When you sit down in a meeting for work, when you're trying to solve a big problem and someone can say, "That's the wrong question. You need to be asking this." People who can do that generally understand the bigger picture and all the various variables and factors in play and how everything fits together. It's some next level action to watch the entire room go, "Wow, we're looking at trees and that guy's looking at the forest." I accidentally got a promotion literally yesterday for doing something like this. I'm a contract attorney doing doc review and randomly get an email saying they're going to bring in 20% of people for conversations. I immediately crap my pants and I assume I'm in trouble. My initial reaction is, well, if I had more frequent feedback, I could code documents accurately with better consistency. Sort of pack a parachute if they ask why I'm messing up. Turns out the meeting is just a sample of people they wanted to ask about how management was doing, if we had the right tools, if we had too many meetings, if we needed something, blah blah blah. Basically just getting feedback about how the project is going. Since I already had my previous excuse on deck, I sort of just blurted out. The dude seems really interested and takes a bunch of notes. Fast forward to yesterday, I get an email saying they want another meeting. They made me a QC team leader reviewing and managing a group of like 15 people because I apparently have such deep insight into the importance of quality feedback and maintaining consistency. Lazy people are the best at this. I witnessed a kindergartner who couldn't draw straight lines, keep his pencil still, and drag the paper around to draw a triangle. That kid is going to invent the first warp drive. Seriously, don't move the ship, move space. He gets it. My dad had a business trip in Seattle that I tagged along on so I could see a soccer match and explore the city. He invited me to go to the research hospital with him one day and I agreed. They were working on testing some type of cardiovascular tool on a cadaver that they would stimulate blood flow in to test. Seeing my dad, who didn't go to college, barely graduated from high school, lived on welfare with a single mom, and who knocked up a teenage girl when he was a teenager himself, performed surgery on a cadaver using a tool he invented that could potentially save thousands of lives, blew my mind. He had hundreds of patents on devices. I got surgery 3 years ago and my shoulder surgeon used a tool he invented in the 90s. He's an incredibly smart and hardworking man who just got the right amount of luck to get him where he is today. I doubt luck played a part. Everything is hard work and luck. So many people who give it their all get nowhere. I've seen it happen with so many bright and talented individuals. It sucks, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. I like it when you meet someone whose English is imperfect, but you realize they're very intelligent and are able to explain their thoughts. I remember once meeting a Japanese archaeologist who wasn't the best English speaker, but when he explained his research to me, it was absolutely fascinating. There was this dude I worked with ages ago who immigrated from China. The higher-ups would get pretty frustrated with him because he was constantly coming up with clever ideas and interesting new ways to do things, but they just wanted to keep the status quo. Some ideas were decent, others were likely brilliant. Anyhow, his spoken English was downright brutal. His written was perfectly fine though. Eventually he left, probably out of frustration. This is why it bugs me so much when people assume that broken English or heavily accented English is an indication that someone is less intelligent. English is hard to learn when it's not your mother tongue, and it's even worse when you're an adult, especially if you're coming from a culture that doesn't even use the same alphabet or similar grammar. Gotta plug my dad in here. Had some friends over, and just to mess around, we asked him the definition of random words in the dictionary. We opened it to the eyes, and I asked the definition of 10 to 12 letter, 3 to 4 syllable words. Not only did he nail all of them, but most definitions were verbatim. When we got to the 10th word, he goes, the verb or the noun, and we lost it. It was seriously ridiculous. We were freshmen in high school and could hardly pronounce the words we picked. Turns out he read the whole dictionary over the summer when he was 16 and bored. Guy is still the smartest person I've ever met. Gonna plug my dad as well. He's been driving big rigs for so long that he has almost memorized the United States interstate highway system. No kidding. You can give him the interstate number and the mile marker and he can usually guess your exact location plus or minus 10 miles. My older brother has really bad ADD and always did terrible in school. I never realized how smart he was until a few years ago. We were watching Jeopardy together and he knew most of the answers to the most obscure questions. I was blown away. I swear it was like the scene from Groundhog Day. That sounds like my cousin. ADHD and ADD, awful in school, and an absolute genius. I used to work with a physician who had patients' medical record numbers memorized. Not because he was trying, he just saw them once and would keep it in his memory. 16 digits. When medical students would ask questions, he would say page number and paragraph where they could find the answer. He wouldn't use progress notes with patients. He would just walk into the room and ask the patient about all their family members by name and their entire medical history without ever glancing at a note. He would write notes 6 weeks after seeing a patient. Never miss a beat. Billing would scream about it constantly. On a side note, he had zero knowledge of the real world or social skills. Memory was the craziest I've ever seen. Years ago, I had a girlfriend in Denmark whom I visited once every few months. A few blocks away from where she lived was a secondhand book and game store run by a friendly old lady. It was basically a normal house, only every wall was covered in bookcases filled with books and movies and video games, ground floor and first floor, and she sat at a desk in the corner with a pile of new old stuff for cataloging. I looked through the neatly alphabetized PS2 games to see if she had any Dynasty Warriors 4, which I hadn't been able to find anywhere else. No luck. I asked her, she thought it over for a second, then said it didn't sound familiar. We bought VidDoc instead and headed home. Flash forward about a year, we stop by again, walk in the door, the lady sees me and says, "Ah, young man, good you're here. I have Dynasty Warriors for you." 4, was it? I'd been told she had a ridiculous memory, but I was just amazed. My girlfriend swears she hadn't been there in months either. I was just another customer and she remembered me and what I was looking for a year. When my dad just decided to add an addition to the house. Like he'd be out there 70 to 80 hours a week, adding 3 extra floors to the house with running water up to the 3rd floor. He would rent excavators and large moving equipment, and only like 3 or 4 times would he hire an extra hand. That was amazing. Lots of dads decide to do that, but it sounds like yours actually completed it, which is absolutely amazing. My dad never did large-scale renovations, but we never had contractors do anything. New carpet? Dad. New roof? Dad. Trees cut down right next to the house? Dad. Back porch? Dad. And none of these were remotely near his actual job. My mother also took apart our very first VCR from the 80s and fiddled around with it for hours until it would work with our archaic TV. Talk about some jerry-rigging. My wife is smart, like 6 languages fluently smart without breaking a sweat. Has never not done well in school, always gets promoted, etc, etc. But no one in my family saw this because she's an introvert and tries to keep herself dumb so people get her and like her. My family and I are smart. She's next level up. So after we got engaged, family had a get together. As in cousins, friends, lots of people. As usual, we played some group games. She was reluctant, but I pulled her aside and asked her to try and fit in. She obliged, but was annoyed with me. Started with Pictionary. She schooled the room. Moved to a bunch of card games with a single deck, counted cards, knew everyone's deck, etc. Quiz board games, knew all the answers. Over and over again, she was dominant to the point of silencing my family. It was unnerving even for me. A few weeks later when we visited her family, "Oh, we don't play games with her. She plays to decimate the competition." "Oh, did you ever consider that you all need to get good?" My ex-wife is like this. No one in my family will play any games with her anymore because she always wins. There was this one time when she was on a winning streak, I decided to float the idea of all 7 of us against just her. She still won every round. Found out my little brother, age 12, has a legit photographic memory. He's a big Lord of the Rings fan and knows an abnormal amount about the series. Whenever he answers questions about it, he looks up and squints a bit. I asked him about it and it turns out that he's actually reading from the book in his head. He can even jump to random page numbers. He also knows a ridiculous amount of world history. I go to him when I need help with that. Sadly, he's adopted and we don't share the same genes. I'd like to be friends with your little brother. I'd take him to parties with me just for the Lord of the Rings trivia so I don't have to pull out the complete guide to Middle-earth. Just kidding, I don't get invited to parties. It would be interesting to find out if his memory is spatial with respect to books. If he had been reading from an ebook reader, whether he would have found it more difficult to remember. From your description of his memory, it sounds like he literally photographs the pages with his mind. Growing up, your dad is always that nut. At least mine was. Always thought of him as a joker who liked to invent stuff around the house. Long story short, when I was around 12, he made a basic hydrogen engine. He was on track to making it practical for his van and was so stoked, claiming he would get up to 4 to 5 more miles to the gallon. He was able to make a small hydrogen cell and a housing for it and set it in his van. It was so complicated, I can't even explain it properly. He got 3 to 4 more miles to the gallon, so his prediction was pretty close. He was then stuck on how to get more out of it, make it cheaper, and, maybe pitch his idea to get it on the markets. One day he was Googling new ideas and came across an Aussie uni that basically did the same thing before him. I don't know the details, but it crushed him. He stopped working on it, kinda stopped making stuff. A few years ago, I was home visiting and was walking through his workshop and found the cell tucked away all dusty. It dawned on me then that I will never come close to being as smart and intuitive as my father. I told him before I left too. My old man cried, I cried, it was great. Man, beautiful and sad. I bet it meant a lot to your old man hearing you say that.
People, what is your craziest, most interesting, I need a favor, no questions asked story? Can I stand here and speak to you like we know each other? A girl was leaving a wedding reception alone from a cruise boat I worked on. I was on shore as passengers were leaving, and she came up and asked me this. I told her absolutely and jumped right into the role. She gave me a big hug and said how good it was to see me. Around then, I kept a smile on my face, but asked if something was wrong. As it turned out, there was another guest at the reception making her uncomfortable. She said he hadn't done anything specific, it was just a bad feeling. But she didn't want to go pointing him out or accusing him of anything. She just wanted to see him go to his car and leave before she went out to the lot. Once that happened, we chatted another few minutes before she was on her way. I cannot deny that it is good to go with your gut feeling in situations like this. If you've watched Patch Adams, you know. Like this person said, they didn't accuse this person of anything directly or even feel like they did anything specific, but you know, your life is in your hands at the end of the day based on the decisions that you make. If you wanted to go about it that way, go ahead. Not me, but a family member. He was USAF with a number of people under his command and stationed in Nevada IIRC. In the middle of the night, one of his guys shows up on his porch, banging on his door as if his life depended on it. "Sir, I done messed up. I need your help to fix it. Can you come with me?" With nothing more than saying, "Son, whatever it is you need, we'll get you through it." He dons his dungarees and gets in the guy's car and they drive off into the dead of the night. He notices they're headed out of town into the desert in the pitch black of night. He tries to get the driver to talk and the guy just sort of breaks down. "I had an argument with my woman, so I drove her out into the desert and left her there. I done messed up. They'll boot me out for sure after this." The boss is doing his best to keep the guy calm, reassuring him he's going to come out of this okay. Outwardly, he's serene, but he's getting more and more anxious by the minute. They drove further and further into the desert, finally pulling off-road. They get out and the guy goes into his trunk, hands over a flashlight and points his boss towards where he left the girl. Boss starts calling out, hoping the girl was nearby, and turns to ask the airman for his girl's name. While turning, the beam of his flashlight hits the guy, and all the tumblers scarily clicked into place. The airman was carrying a shovel. In the heat of an argument, the airman strangled his gal to death and drove her out into the desert in a state of panic over what he'd done. So he went to the one guy he knew could help him set things to right, his boss. His boss that somehow now found himself helping to dig a shallow grave and trying to seem supportive. After all, here he was in the desert with a killer. Nobody knew where he was and certain death awaited at the hands of this guy or those of Mother Nature if he couldn't keep a cool head. The officer was smart about it. He convinced the airman to bury her shallow so the scavengers could come and clean up. And so the job only took a few minutes. They go back to the car and he casually manages to leave the shovel stabbed upright into the roadside to mark the location. On the drive back into the city, the airman is almost euphoric, relieved. The boss keeps reassuring him all the way back into town, just waiting to get out of the danger zone that is the desert. As they pull into the city, the boss has his airman pull into an all-night drive-in diner and then pays for burgers, fries, and shakes. When the meal's almost done, he tells the kid, "You know what you've got to do, son. You know I can't do it for you." The guy kind of nods, walks over to the payphone, and calls the cops to confess. Yeah, the instant that they said, left her in the desert, I was just like, oh man, she dead. I was 17 and my father and mother traveled to the countryside for their 21st wedding anniversary. A few hours after they left, I got a call from my father saying he needed me to do something for him. The serious tone he used made me say, "Sure, absolutely," without knowing what he was about to ask. He told me to go out to the front where there would be a wrapped present on the foot of the driveway. He told me not to open it, look around to see if anybody was watching, then put it in my car and drive it to a commercial waste dumpster up the road and throw it out. I then had thoughts like, is my father a drug dealer and has he gotten himself in trouble with some gang? I asked what the hell was going on and he just reiterated that he needed me to do this for him without any questions or opening the gift. I did exactly as he asked. I picked up the gift, made sure nobody was watching, and threw it out into the appropriate dumpster. I never found out exactly what was in that box and never opened it. However, shortly after, my mother became suspicious of him having an affair. After, my father denied it, but his story unraveled over time. He was found by my mother in bed with another woman. My mum, shortly after, attempted self-deletion. They then both involved myself and my brother in painful attempts of pitting us against one parent or another. I later found out the box almost certainly just contained pictures of my father banging his mistress, whom he is now married to. I don't speak to my parents much anymore and moved interstate. I'm not sure if this person is English or not based on the way they wrote mum, M-U-M, and the talk of the countryside makes me go, oh, this person's totally freaking English. But like, then they mention moving interstate and I'm like, oh, they're American? Or maybe they're an English person who lives in America. Pretty minor considering some of the other stories here, but I have one. During the Dark Knight Rises premiere, me and my friend were close to the front of the line. Our theater was the only showing for the next 2 hours, as the other room had broken down. The people in that line were told that if there was any room left in ours, they'd be allowed in. Slim chance to none, so we start going in, and this guy at the front of the other line looks desperate. We lock eyes, and he gives me a questioning nod. I nod back, knowing what he wants. He walks straight up to me with a big smile on his face and says, "Hey man, how have you been?" I respond immediately with, "Max, good to see ya. Glad you could make it. I'm good, you?" I have no idea if that's his name, but he looks like a Max and he rolls with it. And from there we launch into small talk and shoulder claps as he walks in with me and my friends under the suspicious eye of the usher. As soon as we're in, he veers off and tells me he owes me one. My friends patiently wait until he's out of earshot and ask me who the heck was that. I shrugged and said, no idea. When the movie ends and we walk out, we see each other, and this time he's with a girl. He hurries over to me and says he got a date with the girl and that this is the best night ever. If I ever need anything, he's my man. Never saw him again. Max was a cool guy. I hope his date went well.
Max does indeed sound like a cool guy. He deserves to be happy.
And it was very nice of that guy to give that guy a hand, I guess. It's kind of funny the things that can happen from like a telling look or something, or just like a mutual understanding in a single glance. While we were hanging out, my best friend got a call from his girlfriend. Now, she hardly let him out of her sight on any given day, so having some free time to sit around, chat, and play up some games had become a vanishingly rare commodity. But now, on this particular day, she really needed him. She didn't have a car and needed him to drive her and take her somewhere right away. He went, of course. She told him she needed to go to an interview with a college she'd applied for and had forgotten about it, and she needed a ride. My friend took his girlfriend an hour away to the college, called me to chat, and picked her up again a few hours later. It turned out later that she had him drive her to the campus, cheated on him with another guy at a place a few blocks away, and then had her boyfriend drive her home after she slept with this other dude. And that was the story of how my best friend realized he was in a failing relationship. No, wait, he stayed with her 4 more months and rented a place next door to be closer to her before she broke up with him the next day after he moved in, because my friend was in love and she wasn't. That is absolute top-tier harlot behavior. I mean, using your boyfriend as a key instrument in the process of cheating on him is downright nasty.
Been waiting for a chance to share this one. Earlier this year at around 1 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, I get a call from a friend who lives nearby. He was in a total panic, and the only words he could get out to me were, "Dude, open the gate and turn off all the outside lights. Hurry!" Half asleep, I ask him if this is some kind of prank, because you know us guys, fool with each other every now and then. He responds with, "Just effing do it." I decide to comply, still in my boxers, turning off the outside lights. Now, just to add some detail, my house is right next to a traffic circle, so I go outside to the gate to see what's going on, and to my amazement, my friend comes speeding the wrong way around the circle. Halfway into making the turn, he turns off all his lights, turns off the car, and rolls into my driveway through my gate at a serious speed, shouting out the window, "Close the goddamn gate!" About 5 seconds later, I see a police car come speeding by, sirens and lights and everything. As I look back to his car, he emerges with a victoriously smug look on his face, shirt and pants covered in vomit, steering wheel covered in vomit, and the smell of Stro rum making my eyes water. He looked at me, I looked at him, he nodded, I nodded. He asked to use my shower and sleep over. 5 weeks later, he totaled his car, drunk driving, and lost his job because he couldn't get to work anymore. Been sober ever since.
And I truly believe it is honestly probably for the best that friend stay the hell off the road. I used to work at a college and somehow was talked into becoming a sponsor of one of the local fraternities. No Greek letters attached to this frat. It was basically just a bunch of dudes who pooled their extra cash and were legit as far as the small school is concerned. After acting as an adult sponsor for about a year, hell, I was only 24 at the time, I get a late-night call from one of the frat members saying, "We're screwed. There is a dude in the house with a piece and he won't leave." I'm kinda drunk and don't really
really want to get involved. I tell him to call the cops, but he's worried because if the cops come, we will all get expelled. He was probably right. It was a small private Christian school. So I say, fine, I'll be there in 20 minutes. I walked across the apartment complex and knocked on Malcolm's door. Malcolm was a gangbanger from way back who, I can say this because I am confident in my heterosexuality, is the perfect specimen of a man. Over 6 foot, over 200 pounds, and simply shredded with muscles. I tell him the problem and he says, cool, let's go. 10 minutes later, we walk into the party. I ask who the dude causing problems was, find out and point him out to Malcolm. Malcolm walks up to the dude and says, you need to go. Dude looks up, sees Malcolm and says, yeah, man, I was just leaving. The frat took a collection the next day and paid Malcolm's rent for the next 3 months. Malcolm was a bad mother. Maybe it's because they're just good Christian boys at a small Christian school, but it's kind of lazy that they had to call a dude to get one other dude to remove another dude from their party. I don't know how many people are usually to a fraternity. Like, naturally, I don't know. I wasn't there, but the situation just seemed handleable.
A friend who I hadn't heard from in a while calls me up saying he needs $200 and he'll give me $250 by the end of the week. He has his own business and owns houses, so I'm like, yeah, sure. Sure enough, at the end of the week, I get my $250. A week later, he asks for $600 and he'll give me $700 back. Seeing as he paid me back on time the first time, I'm like, sure, why not? A week goes by, no money. 3 months go by, with me calling him once in a while, etc. No money, and he's not picking up anymore. So I go, screw it. I go to his place, call him from my girlfriend's cell phone, and he picks up and says, yeah, he's home. I go to the building he owns where he used to live. He comes over all confused. I ask him for the money. He says all he can give me is $400. This avoiding bullpucky goes on for another 2 months. I go, screw it. Go back to his place again. Says he got robbed or some bullcrap. I think he stopped the chronic and started doing the hardest stuff, to be honest. Anyways, I agree to take his spear launcher, an estimated worth of $600, as collateral for the remaining $300, and while I have not seen him in a long time, I still have the launcher.
Now, it may be debatable whether or not this transaction was actually worth it. You got 4 to 5 months of having to track and nag and follow up this dude for money, but in the end, you got a spear launcher, and cold hard cash is good, but a spear launcher is forever. Kinda silly, but I was at work one day commuting from home in a New York suburb to New York City, and my dad called me. He says, I need a favor, pick up a copy of the most recent Playboy on your way home, okay? I'll pay for it. I asked him, why? And he told me that sometimes when he asks me for things, I should just frickin' do them. Not angry, we're jokers. Turns out there was an article about someone in the wine business that he wanted to read. It was just a bonus that he could confuse the hell out of me in the process. Edit. I can't find the article online, but it was during Rudy Kurniawan's scandal. Check him out. It was apparently a big thing in the wine world, and my dad had done some work with him in the past. Though it would be hilarious if he just wanted the magazine, he did have a real excuse. Now, I don't know about the rest of you lot, but I truly believe that this man's father deceived him and simply wanted a sneaky peek at some Playboy bunnies. I live in a sketchy town with a lot of crime and homeless people. It's practically impossible to exit your apartment without seeing someone homeless. However, they're generally nice, and therefore I'm nice to them too. A few greet me when I walk by because I give them my leftovers sometimes. Well, one particular hobo and I are good friends. By friends, I mean we talked that one time when I was going home from a frat party and he told me I was eyed. Anyway, he saunters up to me one night when I was walking home and asked me to do him a favor. He wanted me to take another route home, but didn't explain why. Now, I typically don't follow instructions from the homeless in the middle of the night, but something in my gut told me to listen to him. Probably because for the first time since I've seen him, he looked sober. So I did. The next day, I heard by word of mouth that a woman was raped minus the G. I don't remember if it was also a murder or not on the route that I was going to take. That woman could have been me. I never saw Hobo Bro again after that. Now, there are 2 reasons why you may have never seen Hobo Bro again, and that's all I'm going to say on the matter.
About a year ago, my roommate asked me to squeeze her boob as hard as I can. I asked her why. She told me to just do it, so I obliged her, and she just stands there with her eyes closed for 5 seconds and then runs out the apartment door giggling. She denies it ever happened now.
Well, I really don't know what to say, dude, except girls, women, they can be pretty weird sometimes. I thought that this was just going to lead up to her asking you to check for a cancer lump or something.
When I was 14, I was spending an unproductive summer vacation day watching TV. I was alone and was somewhat annoyed to hear a desperately loud knock at my door. As I unlocked the door, my best friend at the time rushes in and nearly pushes me over in the process. He was helping his grandma and attempted to skateboard home when diarrhea struck. This guy comes into my house and absolutely destroys my bathroom. It was one of the worst experiences of my life, not to mention his life. But the guy literally didn't ask, and he didn't need to do so. Human beings should let other human beings poop with impunity, unless it's dysentery or something. Now, I say, the poop with impunity is man's truest and greatest right, passed down from God himself. My friend and his wife were raging snow snorters for almost 20 years. They have both been clean for 3 years, and at this point, his prostate cancer has returned after being in remission for several years. He had heart surgery about 3 months ago. A few weeks ago, he asked me if I could do him a huge favor. I told him, of course, because he was there for me when I was completely down and out and unconditionally gave what little he had when no one else could be bothered. He said, "You don't even know what I'm going to ask you yet." I told him that whatever he needed, I'd make it happen. Turns out he and his wife just wanted to ride to Hackensack, New Jersey, so he could buy her a wedding ring. They've been married over 20 years and due to their drug habit have been repeatedly pawned and ultimately sold off their wedding rings. Now they're clean and I feel they believe he doesn't have much time left. He wants her to have her wedding ring. I drove them last week. He couldn't get his legs in the car without help. After they went in and picked out the purchased rings, he couldn't get out of the car to get lunch and pick up the rings when they were ready an hour later. It was a huge effort for him to take that ride and walk without his wheelchair. He spent all his savings on that set of rings. I took a few hours from work and we had a picnic in a park in Hackensack. It wasn't a favor or an inconvenience. I felt lucky they asked. When you're bereft of good health, it's a good thing if you have good friends to make the short time that you have as wonderful as possible.
A friend asked me to store some cooking equipment and related supplies. Bowls, pans, cooking utensils, some wine, whatnot. Turns out he'd been getting some as a kind of bonus from his boss. Except his boss's boss wasn't aware of this, and then the police got involved. Felt zero guilt. Got a nice $500 bottle of wine out of it. Then my brother's alcoholic girlfriend drank it one night. Doesn't even remember it. Just wanted more stuff to get her drunk. I will never forgive her. Edit. Since this is supposed to be a no questions asked story, I do have to admit that I did ask one question. When he said he needed me to store these things, including wine, I have a spot, but it's not refrigerated. Is that okay? To this day, he still chuckles about how that was the only part of this favor that I was concerned about. Edit 2. I know some people are probably curious as to what exactly the deal was, so here's a more detailed explanation that I got after the fact. My friend was a chef at a high-end 4-star restaurant. Now, at a place like this, they are really serious about both health codes and presentations. So the amount of equipment they went through monthly was pretty significant. Scratch a mixing bowl, chuck it. Dent in a saucepan, chuck it. Even the slightest blemish on something the customer would see, it's gone. A lot of this stuff wound up with the staff at their homes. That wasn't all of the stuff that wound up at their homes. But the point is more that it's not like this stuff wandering off was really eating into the bottom line. Or at least, that's what my friend and most of the rest of the staff thought. Now, on his own, he probably wouldn't have taken much of anything home past the odd dented, scratched dish and whatnot, but his boss openly encouraged staff to use the employee equipment discount for basic stuff and even the occasional bottle of wine when an employee really stepped up during a busy night or something else. The boss did the same himself, so nobody thought much of it. Flash forward a few months, and one night the boss is mysteriously absent. Eventually, they come to find he's down at the police station being interviewed on suspicion of felony theft. Everyone on staff is thinking this is a huge overreaction on some upper level person's part, an attempt to scare the staff straight and kill off the employee equipment discount bonus in one go. Then they got more details. So at the time, my friend had taken a total of 6 of those bottles of wine and thought I was probably abusing things a bit. His boss had taken whole cases of wine. My buddy had maybe 8 creme brulee dishes. The boss had a few dozen. Pick an example of something my friend thought was on the border. The boss had 5 to 20 times as much, and that was just over the last year. So long story still long, they quickly realized that the police investigation was legitimate, and they were all likely accomplices. A few people panicked and tossed all their stuff. Some, like my friend, decided to hide it until things were a bit less crazy. Importantly, nobody talked, so only the boss went down for it.
Damnable sticky-fingered gremlin boss giving me random crap and trying to take me down with him. That would suck so hard. Don't know how familiar you guys are with how underage college parties work, but when the police bust in, usually for a noise complaint, nothing happens. But my buddy was at a party at one of our more sketchy friends' houses, and the police bust in, find booger sugar, and the 3 to 4 cops start trying to process and arrest the whole party. He is luckily in the back. They haven't seen him yet, so he texts me saying to come to that house in a specific spot. Turn my lights off and text him. So I do, and I watch him leap out of a second-floor window and run into my car. And upon seeing the 2 cop cars as I drive off, I ask my first question, that being, what in the figgity yuck? He gave me a bottle of Grey Goose for my trouble. That's a pretty good friend to give you a bottle of Grey Goose for your trouble. My first question would be, where was my invitation to this party? Got a call from a friend at 4 a.m. one night declaring that he needed some help. We both lived in the same dorm at the time, and I figured he was just trying to get in without being seen by the resident assistant drunk, because we were both underage at the time. My groggy butt didn't ask any questions and went down to the side door to let him in. He wasn't there though. I looked around, called his name a couple times, smoked a cig, and went back inside because it was cold as Santa's balls outside. I tried calling him again to no avail and ended up going to his room to see if his roommate knew where he was. Turns out he was in there, naked, handcuffed to the bed with a gag around his neck that he spat out. I laughed so hard I woke the neighbors up, and then they laughed with me. We let him out and he proceeded to tell us this story of this fine woman getting all frisky on him and handcuffing him to a bed. Apparently she was on top, and right before he got lucky, she hopped off, laughed at him, and told him to figure it out when he asked how he was getting out. That's when he laid there for what he said was 3 hours trying to get his phone from his desk at the foot of the bed to his face so he could call. Felt bad for him, but never letting him live that one down. Life's a matter of perspective, and I would much rather be this dude than the guy that got stranded in a desert in the Dodged a Bullet video I recorded. I'm just gonna say that.
What's a great hobby that does not get more expensive the more you dive into it? Collecting rocks that you find. Plus, it keeps decorating costs down. Who needs some fancy knick-knack to fill up a nook when I've got a large chunk of conglomerate or pegmatite? That'll do. Magnet fishing. All you need is a strong magnet and some rope, really, and maybe a few other things like gloves. Might even find something valuable one day if you're exceedingly lucky. I pulled a 9mm out of a local river. Explaining magnet fishing to a cop you called your cell phone is an interesting conversation. In the Netherlands, people took up metal detecting during lockdown. Lots of unexploded World War II bombs were found. Some guy thought the safest thing to do was dig it up and drop it off at the local police station. The police didn't agree with that. Smithing. It doesn't grow in cost because it starts off astronomically expensive and just stays that way. Learning to mirror sharpen a knife on whetstones like the ancient Japanese masters? $300. Getting your hand stitched shut after touching the blade and losing a pint of blood? Priceless. Extreme couponing. If you're gonna do this, please don't be a jerk to the cashiers. We know you spent hours figuring out how to buy $50 of stuff for $1.63. But it's not our fault when our coupon machine doesn't work, the online coupons don't go through, or if you're 80 cents short of the total needed for that $10 off online coupon you were banking on. Please don't get angry at cashiers. We're happy you're saving so much, but when things go wrong, there's not much the non-managerial staff can do either. Also, don't break up your one purchase into 10 purchases when there's a line in the store. Either wait until there's no line, or be willing to step aside until the line goes down. People don't want to wait in line for 20 minutes while you finesse your purchases. I had one lady who got through 3 broken up purchases, noticed a line, and then stepped aside and let 2 people in line go before finishing her last 5 in her purchase chain. I swear I wanted to hug that lady. Please don't be rude or a jerk just because your couponing plan didn't work flawlessly. Most of us low-paid staff are rooting for you and want to help you with couponing so long as you're polite, pleasant, and don't hold up our fricking line. Geocaching? It's so easy. All you need is a few small trinkets and a geocaching resource. When I was a kid, my family loved to geocache, and eventually we set one up near our house. An office worker wrote us a long ballad about how excited he was to see a new cache and how he rushed out, found and signed it, and made it back in less than an hour, just in time for his meeting. It was so sweet and memorable. Geocaching is just such a great hobby. I left a laminated card with a QR code that leads to a rickrolling. Well, at least we have a twofer in these follow-up answers. One really wholesome, and the other really jerky, mean sort that I sort of love. I think how funny the Rickroll QR code is depends on how far you were making people go out to get it. Because if that thing is at the top of a mountain and actually listed on a resource, you may be my new hero. Lockpicking. That actually makes more money if you're fast enough. Okay, but seriously, you can do it legally, you know. Lots of people lose their keys or never got keys to something they own. Funny story, one day I had the most horrible, nerve-wracking workday. I just wanted to go home, make dinner, and chill with my significant other. She knew about my workday, so she didn't tell me about how we had a power outage, hoping she could fix it before I got home. She couldn't, and all the apartments around had power. I figured a fuse must have switched off or gone bust. There was a box with fuses in the hallway, and it had a padlock. I tried to call the super, then the electric company, then any neighbor I could find, and nobody had a key. I tried to cut a can of Coke in a way that could shimmy it, but to no avail. I was as angry as I was desperate. All of our devices were running out of juice by 10 p.m. So I called a locksmith. The guy came around within 20 minutes, opened the padlock within 40 seconds, and left. That was quite expensive. I turned on the fuse switch, went back inside, opened a beer, and ordered a lockpicking kit on Amazon. Been carrying it with me ever since. Came in handy twice. Once my boss got locked out of his office, another time a friend lost her bike keys. I've gotten a bit better, but not a lot better, and I think it's a great life skill. It made me evaluate my security choices better, and it's a great conversation topic sometimes. 9 out of 10 would recommend. Wildcrafting. That's pretty much the entire point. Basically, the skill of identifying and utilizing wild plants for things like food, medicine, and other utilities. The point is generally to use local plants and things you already have available as much as possible. You can get pretty far with some really good Googling, joining some groups. Instagram and Facebook both have some pretty active communities, and nothing more. I picked it up about 2 years ago, and I think the only thing I invested in was a $10 pair of gardening gloves. As a note, wildcrafting should be practiced mindfully with sustainability in mind. Take only what you need. Leave enough for the plants and animals to live well and reproduce. Abundance is there, but only if we don't harm it. At this moment, I have in my kitchen some homemade wine, several jars of jam, including hawthorn, myrtle, and redbuds, fire cider, homemade cough syrup, homemade aloe gel, pickles, including olives, capers, and green almonds, mustard stems, mulberry leaves, and several exotic herbal teas. I'm a total amateur, though. If you find the idea interesting, I suggest following people like Pascal Baudard, for instance, even just to get the idea of how far you can get with it. Oddly enough, lace making. Depending on the style of lace you're doing, the initial cost of tools can be fairly steep or super cheap. Some styles just require a needle and only a needle. But anyway, once you've got the equipment, you're only ever required to buy thread and maybe pins or paper. Maybe pattern books, but if you're even a little bit creative, you've got that covered. My source? I used to make lace. Over the course of 15 years, I spent maybe $200. Not 200 a year, 200 spread over 15 years. Most of that was because I wanted specialty threads like hand-spun linen and stuff. I initially read this as lance making, and I'm now in a Wikipedia hole looking at medieval weaponry. I have nothing really to comment, just thought you should know one of the incredibly weird side effects of your reply. Cross-stitch and embroidery. It's fairly cheap in general, but once you have a few sets in, you have a wide variety of colors to do your own. I recently returned to 3D modeling. It's a hobby with a rock-bottom price of entry that you can invest $10 to $20 in at a time. You can start with Blender, which is a free and powerful program that lets you do everything from modeling and sculpting to texture painting and animating. Getting the fundamentals down is also free thanks to incredible tutors like Grant Abbott and Andrew Price. After that, the world is your oyster. You can either throw a few bucks towards more in-depth tutorial courses or buy add-ons that enhance your workflow. You don't have to do any of that though, and you can just let your creativity run wild. I'm pleased to see the popularity of this answer. If you want to learn more about 3D modeling on a budget, I suggest you download Blender from Steam or their official site. For people who are still interested, here are some more tidbits to clear up the confusion. When I made this post, I was thinking specifically about 3D modeling for its own sake, as a relaxing hobby you do to unwind without thinking ahead. Picture yourself sitting down, creating a kitchen or a spaceship or a zombie dog for fun's sake, and feeling good about yourself. That can lead to commissioned work or 3D printing later on, but it absolutely doesn't have to if you don't want it to. Having good hardware helps, but it isn't a prerequisite. Any computer made in the last 10 years is good enough to run Blender, and lets you pick up the fundamentals. Whether you want to upgrade after that is up to you, but you shouldn't feel the need to unless you've gone way down the rabbit hole. Being artsy helps, but it isn't a necessity either. Anyone can get into 3D with time and patience. Playing cards. As long as those aren't Magic the Gathering cards. Writing. It may even happen that by diving into it, you could earn something. I started a podcast as a hobby with 2 friends that moved to different countries in 2018, and we're still going strong. We talk about different topics every couple of weeks, and it's very fun. The only expense we have is the host website, but we only pay because we've uploaded many episodes and needed more cloud space. But it's still very cheap in comparison to other hobbies. Walking around outside and picking up shiny things you find on the floor, sometimes known as goblining or magpieing. Thanks to everyone for helping me realize how expensive all of my hobbies are. Ditto. I mean, collecting plastic miniatures that I'm likely never going to paint for my tabletop gaming hobby is a shamefully expensive habit. There's a reason we in the hobby call our unpainted figures our piles of shame. Reading. Having fun isn't hard when you've got a library card. Stick collecting. No joke, it sounds dumb at first, but once you get a few solid sticks, you'll start to love it. You should see my arsenal. Game development. Unity is free, Visual Studio is free, Blender is free, Asaprite is $20, but also not necessary. I do highly recommend it though. It's really a fun hobby that doesn't have to cost anything if you don't want it to. The only cost is your sanity. Reading books from the library, card tricks, shadow puppetry, pressing flowers, singing, and stargazing. Programming. You already have a computer, tablet, 3DS, etc., and if you need a dedicated device, a Raspberry Pi 4 is under $100. Most tools are free. Open source tools are free forever. The internet is full of tutorials and examples. YouTube has a lot of courses in any field you like. Programming for fun has a competitive side too, but that's a whole other story. Regardless of your hobby, the cost is inversely proportional to your self-control. The more self-control you have, the cheaper the hobby is. Collecting buckets. I've got 7 buckets. The 4th one is also dark blue. Meditation. One of the cheapest hobbies. But people manage to spend money on this too, joining expensive courses, buying aesthetics like expensive candles and mats and stuff, going in on meditation retreats in high-end resorts in exotic locations. People really made this an expensive thing. Weightlifting. Average person would even save a ton of money by fixing their diet as a side effect. I bought my own home gym 10 years ago. Paid $2,000 for a used set, and had a few upgrades, so about $2,500 altogether. I have almost all of the equipment needed, minus a leg press station. I've had it for 10 years now, so I guess my home gym would have cost me $20 a month if you divvy it up. A gym membership at an actual place here runs about $80 a month, plus gas and time to get there. I'm super strong and relatively healthy. I should jump on my elliptical more. For the first 5 years, I also ate super healthy and lost a ton of weight. Eating healthy stopped me from eating out and also made my groceries inexpensive. I've been a little more lax now, it's tougher with my wife and kids around. I still have the gym though, and I still like lifting weights. Who knows how many years I've extended my life by? Which, I guess, will cost me money though. God damn it, you can't win. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Gardening. If anything, it becomes virtually free after a few harvests because you can take the seeds out of the vegetables you've just picked and replant them. Plus, you already have free compost from the remaining plant matter and peels and stuff you picked. If you play your cards right while there's an initial investment, it'll pay for itself in the end. Nope, you get addicted to buying new plants. I disagree. You just find new groups and trade. It's amazing how easy it is to grow and propagate most of the stuff you'd buy. I even made a rule. Most, if not all of my annuals will be grown from seed. If I can't enjoy gardening that way, then I just shouldn't do it. Seeds can stay viable for a surprisingly long time, and they're crazy cheap. I'm still using seeds from packets I bought in 2016. Some things don't work like that. Carrots seem to not last that long, for example. But tomatoes, eggplants, aubergine, basil, cilantro, coriander, and onions, a lot of stuff does. More than that, you can buy seeds from heirloom or open-pollinated plants and save seeds from one year to the next. I think I'm on my 3rd or 4th generation of onions. I also started getting into recycling or regenerative gardening. Use the free trash that exists and be smart about what you plant, and you can actually improve the quality of the soil rather than relying on fertilizers or backbreaking labor year after year. Rainforests exist without anybody mining phosphorus and sprinkling it about. Lush landscapes exist all over the planet without anyone managing them. With a little management and forethought, you can create a tiny little ecosystem that doesn't want or need every little thing to be controlled. One major mindset shift that most farmers still haven't adopted, much less gardeners, is to treat your soil like it's a perennial crop that's harvested and pruned by the plants you grow in it, and the way you treat it. A thriving, intentional ecosystem underground will generally result in happy, healthy plants. Origami? Birdwatching? Oh, birdwatching is a slippery slope. $20 for a great field guide to your local birds, $100 for a starter pair of binoculars, $40 to $80 for a nice bird feeder set up at home, then $500 for a decent spotting scope, up to $1,000 for high-end Zeiss or Swarovski binoculars, $8,000 for a trip to Central America with guided forest tours, then $75K for an RV so you can travel America chasing rarities once you retire. It really depends on your level of commitment. Cycling, in theory, buy a bike and only have to pay for minor maintenance while increasing fitness levels and happiness. However, one will quickly realize that the proper number of bikes to own is N+1, where N is the current number of bikes owned. Optimizing your personal finances. Ah yes, my favorite hobby. Tied for first with my actual fricking job, doing dishes and cleaning my bathroom. Ah yes, none of these will beat my main hobby though, living a mundane life, never doing anything outside the ordinary until I die in a rest home several decades in the future. Come on, dream bigger, people. Hiking. I love getting lost in outdoor spaces. It inspires my creative work and is generally free. Hiking is free if you do short trips locally, but it does get more expensive the more you get into it. First, you want to get a decent pair of boots at $150 to $200, and a decent day pack at around $100. Then you want the high-tech clothing. Then you want to start doing overnight trips, which means you need an entire set of backpacking equipment, starting with a pack at $250 to $300, plus all the accoutrement needed to survive on your own. Cooking set, tent, sleeping bag, that kind of stuff. Then you want better equipment. Then you want to start going to life-list destinations that require you to get on an airplane. It never ends. Exercising and running. You only need to buy a good pair of shoes and some workout clothes, and you'll be set for a while. Most people running for general fitness are probably not doing more than 20 miles a week, and if you're just going to go out run a few miles throughout the week and the occasional 5 to 10K run, then running is very cheap. You might not even buy 2 pairs of shoes a year. Beyond that, people just need to have the appropriate clothes, a stick of Body Glide, and maybe a water bottle. Drawing. I use a pencil, a pen, and a sketchbook. It's possible to make drawing more expensive. Better pens cost money, colored pencils cost money, digital art supplies cost money, but it's not necessary to buy those things in order to enjoy drawing. D&D. Depending on how invested you can get into at the start, if you get all of the books, you could easily spend over $100, but you can also find PDFs for a lot cheaper. After that, though, you just have to find people to play with, and you don't have to spend any more money. Learning languages? ? Playing an instrument. Once you have the instrument, the price drops drastically. I wasn't thinking about how obsession factors into playing music as a hobby though, and that most people who play music will eventually want a higher-end instrument. This is especially the case with Western instruments, and even more so with Western orchestral instruments. The reason I specified Western is because I personally play 2 Korean percussion instruments. One where a high-end version is probably $30, and the other where the high-end version is closer to $150. This is due to the fragility of both instruments, because nobody wants to buy a $500 plus one every few months or year or so when it breaks depending on the frequency of play and how hard you hit both. They're not supposed to be hit too hard. Computer programming. Python is free, the modules are free, new modules keep coming out and getting better for free. Plenty of resources out there, including YouTube, Automate, theboringstuff.com. They're all free. A hobby that changes the way you see the world and adds another method of problem solving. It gets you exposed to all kinds of other fields. Also, it could land you a work-from-home job making great money or save you time on completing boring, repetitive tasks. Learning Python gets you a huge head start on learning other languages as well, but Python can be used for a whole project. It's vast. Disc golf. It's really fun and you can buy discs for like $10 and that's pretty much all you need. I can't believe I had to get all the way through the video just to find this. Disc golf cost me about $30 to $50 for the first 3 years. I just used the same discs and I was gifted some. And even when I did decide to get more discs, it's incredibly reasonably priced. That and most courses have free access. It's a great sport. Dumpster diving. Cliff diving. It's extremely cheap if you don't survive the first time. Knitting. You could probably buy all the needles and other various gadgets you'll ever need for $200. Then you only need to pay for the yarn for the project you're working on. There are loads of free tutorials online. Skateboarding. It's very cheap so far. I do recommend buying a good quality board and not something from Walmart. But I've gotten a lot out of this board, and when I break the board, instead of paying another $140 for a whole new complete, I just have to buy a new deck for $30 to $65, and so on for the rest of the parts. Just wanted to add now how much I've loved skateboarding since I started a couple of months ago. I never thought I'd do something like it, and I used to have horrible balance, but with some work, my balance has become better than I could have dreamed of, and I've had a ton of fun. All of my friends are starting now. Bodyweight fitness, barefoot running, yoga, but obviously you can let costs accelerate if you have to go to Mexico to run with Tarahumara, or go to expensive yoga classes locally or in India. Daydreaming is fun, then you write it down and you have a story. Not a good one, but it is a story. Sleeping. I've been trying to start this hobby, but I'm not very good at it, and it can get very expensive depending on commitment and personal preference. Reading. The library is free, and there are always cheap books at garage sales and thrift shops. Recreational maths. All you need is a brain. Fanfiction. As long as you already own a computer, you're good to go, because it's actually illegal to make money off of it. To do so would be copyright infringement. You may need money for the therapy you'll need when you read the wrong stuff while looking around for some inspiration for your own work, though. That is true. I think that reading Harry Potter and the School of Prayer and Miracles may have actually caused parts of my body to give up and cease working, requiring some time off and several hospital visits. Expensive stuff. Pixel art. Unlike other graphic design methods where you might need expensive software like Photoshop or Illustrator, you can use MS Paint or a variety of free softwares, even for animation. It's a great hobby because the pixels limit where you can place them, there's a finite number of combinations and such, and refining techniques with color palettes, lighting and blending and stuff. There's so much you can do. Aquariums and aquascaping, if you don't fall victim to the way people try to flex when you can use natural resources to recreate natural habitats, since that's basically the goal. Potting soil and ingenuity trumps ADA tanks and expensive lights any day. I'm just trying to make a sanctuary for my fish, not flex on the gram. Browsing Am I the Genius on YouTube. Russian roulette, although there is a 1 in 6 chance of it leading to a funeral, and funerals are expensive. Homemade salsa. A food processor is the most expensive thing you'll buy for it. There's a salsa snob Reddit if you want to learn. It's not hard. Collecting ALF memorabilia. Nobody wants it and it never gets more expensive for my GD brother-in-law to buy me more worthless junk for birthdays and Christmas. He thinks it's funny every time, so the laughs are cheap too. I'm lucky in that most of my hobbies save or generate money. Programming. This has become my career, but I started making games and mobile apps that did okay and still generate income today. Writing. I've had about 10 professional sales. Not a lot of money, but all I had to invest was my time. Cooking and baking, it saves on restaurants and generally results in better, healthier food. Gardening. You grow your own ingredients. I live in a condo, but I grow herbs and hot peppers. I put those in everything. And biking. Save on transportation costs and get some exercise. The commute to work went from the worst to the best part of my day. The upfront cost of a good bike can be high, but it pays for itself. And as a tangent, there is scuba diving, and okay, this is expensive. I know it can be an income generator or a career, but it's a bigger investment of time and money to get there. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.